Hey guys, tonight we journey back to the bustling streets of ancient Rome, where marble glows under oil lamps, sandals slap dusty cobblestones, and you're doing your best not to breathe too deeply near the public latrine. You're standing beside a smiling Roman vendor. He's holding out a small clay jar with a cork, saying something about whitening power like no other. You sniff. Bad move. It smells exactly like you think it does. Urine. Human. Possibly goat. Hard to say. Welcome to the world of ancient Roman dental hygiene, where pee was not a problem, but a prized product. Now, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing how far this sleepy little channel travels. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in a typical Roman insula. An apartment block that creaks with voices, footsteps, and the occasional argument about fish sauce. Downstairs, the street bustles. Upstairs, a woman is brushing her teeth with a mixture of crushed bones, pumice, and yes, just a dab of aged urine. It's not some fringe quirk either. This is standard practice. If you're someone who cares about having pearly whites, and in Rome, even the lower classes do, you're putting a surprising number of things in your mouth before breakfast. Historians still argue whether the practice was driven more by actual cleaning benefits or sheer tradition, but the chemistry is sound. Aged urine contains ammonia, which is, inconveniently for modern stomachs, a natural cleaning agent. Think of it like nature's bleach. If you don't mind the smell, it's actually doing something.
You follow your host down a stairwell and out onto a street shaded by a canopy of linen stretched between rooftops. There's a familiar sound, pottery clinking, donkeys braying, and laughter from a group gathered near the corner. One man holds a small sign advertising Luna's whitening elixir, now aged 8 days. Apparently, there's a sweet spot. Too fresh, and it doesn't have enough punch. Too old, and, well, let's just say your enamel might not survive the acidity. But 8 days? Perfect. You duck into a nearby bathhouse, not for a soak yet, but because it's one of the few places where hygiene rituals feel almost sacred. Here, Roman men of nearly every class scrape their skin clean with strigils, oil themselves up, and yes, spit polish their teeth in public. You observe a man applying his dentifrice, a powder, with the confidence of someone who believes he's practically a dentist. Best mixture is deer antler and fermented urine, he tells his friend. Clears the rot right out. You do your best to nod and look impressed, while quietly vowing to never eat again. The funny thing is, you start to notice something. These folks don't seem embarrassed. In fact, they're a little proud of their routines. Hygiene in Rome is as much a social activity as it is practical. Bathhouses, forums, even latrines, they're gathering spaces. Gossip happens over steam and sponges. Tooth cleaning becomes just another step in the morning's long procession of self-care and social maneuvering. Oh, and speaking of sponges, that's what you're using for, let's say, all your hygiene needs down here. But don't worry, we'll get to that particular treat later.
Now, back to your own teeth. You're given a wooden stick, chewed at one end until it frays like a tiny mop. That's your brush. The paste? A greedy blend of ash, crushed shells, and yes, your friend ammonia. It stings a little. Actually, more than a little.
But your breath? It's sharper somehow. Mainstream Roman authors actually wrote about this. Pliny the Elder, Rome's answer to a very intense podcast host, mentions urine-based dental remedies in his sprawling natural history. He recommends not just any urine, mind you, but specifically foreign urine, Spanish if you can afford it. There's even evidence that people paid a premium for well-aged Iberian imported pee. That's dedication. Historians still debate how much of this was real science and how much was marketing. The ancient world had snake oil too, after all. But the demand was there. Rome imported everything from spices to silk, and if people could make a denarius selling bottled Spanish tinkle, they absolutely would. You walk down another street, past mosaics of dolphins and long-forgotten gods. You spot a family brushing together like it's a sacred ritual, each person sharing the same bowl of toothpaste. You're handed a dab, and again, you wonder what exactly you agreed to in this dream. But there's something hypnotic in the rhythm of it. The gentle scrape of brush on enamel, the spitting into a bronze basin, the soft hum of daily life. It's not glamorous, but it's oddly satisfying. You too are becoming a believer in the Roman way. Wake up, brush with pee, oil your skin, argue about politics at the baths, and end the day at a toga with decent breath and a barely chipped incisor. It's not exactly Listerine, but hey, when in Rome. You step out into the late morning sun, and the city hums with its usual drama. Chariot wheels grinding over cobblestones, fishmongers yelling half-hearted insults, and a philosopher loudly debating himself outside the bakery. As you make your way past a row of columns, you notice something strange. A line of men relieving themselves into large stone jars. They're not hiding. In fact, there's a certain casual elegance to it. One hand on a hip, the other holding a scroll or chatting to a neighbor. These aren't just any jars either. These are public urinals, and they're part of something so deeply Roman, it actually makes sense when you stop thinking like a modern person. See, in Rome, pee isn't waste, it's raw material, liquid gold, or, to borrow the phrase from Emperor Vespasian himself, money that does not stink. The Felunica down the street, a Roman laundromat, needs that urine. So do perfumers, tanners, and yes, dentists. It's collected by the amphora load, aged to increase its ammonia content, and sold wholesale to industries across the city. And here's the kicker. They taxed it. The moment Vespasian realized just how much urine was changing hands, he slapped a levy on it. The vectigal urine was born, and suddenly every public urinal had value, literal cash flow. Not only was the tax real, but Vespasian's son, Titus, actually mocked his father for it, to which Vespasian held a coin under his nose and asked, "Does it smell?" Classic Roman dad joke.
Historians still argue whether this tax was purely economic genius or a power move aimed at monopolizing yet another corner of daily life. But whatever the motive, it worked. The city's plumbing turned into a money-making scheme. You watch a slave collect full jars and load them onto a cart. He's heading to a pholonica, where men in tunics will stomp around in this aromatic broth for hours, cleaning togas with the same stuff you just brushed your teeth with. Try not to think too hard about that. But your journey today isn't about laundry. It's about how interconnected everything is in this peculiar world. The same jar of urine could pass through 5 hands. The man who donated it, the tax collector who skimmed a portion, the launderer who scrubbed with it, the apothecary who bought it for a mouth rinse, and finally, the lady who gargled it and told her friends it changed her life. And believe it or not, there's a hierarchy. Richer Romans donate discreetly. poorer citizens, well, they make a bit of coin doing their business in public. And the best stuff? Imported. Aged. Maybe from the provinces where the diet was said to be cleaner, whatever that means. As you walk past another alleyway, you spot a slave boy stirring a barrel with a long stick. He's singing, whistling even, and that barrel full of urine, slowly turning into high-grade ammonia. The process is almost alchemical. Over days, the urea in the liquid breaks down, creating ammonia-rich compounds, ideal for bleaching, disinfecting, and you guessed it, oral hygiene. It might not pass FDA approval today, but back then, it was gold. You pause by a bathhouse wall, where a faded fresco shows a woman with brilliant white teeth smiling beside a jar labeled Luna Extracta. The message is clear. Do this, and your teeth will sparkle like the moon. That's ancient advertising.
And it's not just women. Roman men, too, cared deeply about appearances, especially their breath. You overhear a conversation between two senators grumbling about someone with futior oris, the dreaded stench mouth. One claims he almost passed out during a speech. The other replies that the man should try Iberian rinse. Everyone laughs. You can't help but chuckle too, not just at the conversation, but at the strange sense of continuity. Even here, 2,000 years in the past, people gossip about bad breath. A vendor waves you over. You look like someone with teeth, he says. Flattery? Maybe. He offers you a small ceramic pot filled with a thick white paste, my wife's recipe, vinegar, crushed oyster shell, and just a whisper of imported ammonia. He winks. The whisper is expensive. You take the pot and walk away as he calls after you, brush twice a day or your molars will march off. What's surprising is how organized it all is. Roman street life is chaotic, yes, but underneath it lies a system. Public urinals connect to underground channels. Taxes are logged on tablets. Pea merchants issue receipts. Even your toothbrush, chew stick, is carved with the maker's mark. There's pride in these details. And maybe, just maybe, the urine obsession isn't as far-fetched as it first seems. After all, ammonia is still used today in cleaners, bleaches, and industrial processes. The Romans just skipped the bottling step. You're beginning to realize something deeper. Roman cleanliness isn't just about looking good, it's about belonging. A bright smile isn't vanity, it's civilization. It means you participate in the system. You pay the tax, use the rinse, laugh at the jokes. And maybe someday someone gossips about your teeth on a marble bench near the forum. But not yet. You still caught 28 sections to go, and who knows, you might just end up a dental celebrity by the end of this.
It's midday now, and the heat has crept into every corner of the city, rising from the paving stones and wrapping around your ankles like a warm toga. You've ducked into the shaded side of a colonnade, where the breeze barely rustles the folds of your borrowed tunic. As you lean against the cooled stone, you overhear a group of women chatting as they sort through baskets of herbs, bones, and tiny clay jars. One of them holds up a vial triumphantly and declares, "This one's for whitening, guaranteed to get the bloodstains off your molars." You ease closer, pretending to examine a nearby basket of dried figs. The women are tooth doctors of a sort, apothecaries, healers, or maybe just local experts in the art of not looking like you chewed rocks for breakfast. Their tools of the trade are laid out before them: burnt mouse bones, oyster shell dust, boiled bark, crushed mint leaves, and of course, aged urine in sealed amphorae that glint in the dappled light. One woman, clearly the leader, holds up a crooked bronze tool. "You see this?" she says, tapping it against her palm. "Fishbone extractor. No fish involved. Gets right under the gum." She grins wide, revealing a row of fairly intact teeth, and adds, "Better than the barber. He'll yank the whole mouth out if you let him." Barbers in Rome are not your gentle 21st century beard sculptors. They're part-time dentists, part-time surgeons, and full-time gamblers with people's mouths. If your tooth hurts, they'll try a poultice. If that fails, they'll reach for pliers that look like they were borrowed from a blacksmith. Anesthesia? That's a glass of wine and a prayer to Apollo.
Historians still argue whether most Romans actually trusted barbers or simply accepted them as a necessary evil. Letters and graffiti suggest mixed feelings. Some praise a good extraction, others joke about waking up with fewer teeth than they had going in. You duck into a small shop nearby, where a teenage apprentice is preparing something called dentifricium. He's working with the focus of a monk, grinding, mixing, measuring. The recipe seems to include charred eggshells, a pinch of soot, and something green and mushy that you don't ask too many questions about. The paste smells like a volcano's breath, but the shopkeeper assures you it's gentle enough for daily use. You ask if it includes urine. "Of course," he says, scandalized. "What do you think keeps the smell in check?" And that's the strange paradox. To Romans, the unpleasant scent of ammonia is cleanliness. You get used to it the way modern noses adjust to chlorine in a pool or bleach in a hospital. After a while, it even starts to smell reassuring, like your morning routine. You head back outside, where a group of schoolboys are playing a game that looks suspiciously like tooth-related charades. One boy holds his jaw and moans dramatically, while another mimics an extraction with a wooden spoon. They all collapse into laughter. It's oddly comforting. Teeth, it seems, have always been comedy gold. At the edge of the marketplace, an old man sits cross-legged with a sign, "Tooth Prophecies, 1 sesterce." Intrigued, you sit across from him. He peers into your mouth, mutters something about strong enamel lines, and predicts long life, but also a great molar betrayal around age 50. You tip him a coin because, honestly, who doesn't love dental divination? You move along, past vendors selling everything from dried dates to love charms, and find yourself in front of a small shrine to Asclepius, the god of medicine. A woman is lighting incense, whispering prayers. She holds her cheek as she bows, clearly hoping for divine help with a toothache. Offerings at the base of the shrine include carved wooden teeth and little scrolls of thanks. Even in a world filled with home remedies and barber dentists, sometimes you need help from the divine.
Historians still debate how widely medical gods like Asclepius were invoked for something as mundane as dental problems. But these shrines suggest that for some, spiritual insurance was worth the candle wax. You end the day's wanderings by returning to a family home where the evening routine is beginning. A mother calls her children to the table, not for dinner yet, but for cleaning. She sets out bowls, brushes, and yes, the unmistakable scent of ammonia hits your nose once more. The kids grumble, but comply. Even the smallest child, barely 5, seems to know the drill. Brush, spit, rinse, repeat. It's a tender, oddly modern scene. Hygiene as a form of care, of discipline, of togetherness. The same way modern families nag about flossing, Roman parents remind their kids to scrape the back teeth, or don't eat figs until you rinse. You sit in the corner, chew stick in hand, and follow along. You dip into the bowl, work the frayed end against your molars, and try not to think about the chemistry too hard. The flavor is earthy. The texture? Gritty. But the process itself? Somehow soothing. Maybe, just maybe you're starting to understand why this strange habit endured for centuries. it's not just about teeth. It's about being Roman. And in this odd, fragrant moment, you are.
You wake early the next morning to the not-so-soothing sound of a neighbor hawking olive oil soap and shouting over a rooster who clearly doesn't care about Roman market laws. Your jaw is a little sore, not from anything serious, just the gentle protest of a modern mouth unaccustomed to ancient dental exfoliation. You stretch, splash water on your face from a terracotta basin, and once again reach for the chew stick. It's smoother today, slightly softened from use, and you're beginning to understand why Romans carried them like we carry lip balm or earbuds. You chew one end until it fluffs, then rub it across your teeth while staring out over a city just beginning to stir. The streets, for once, are quiet. Just a few carts rolling in from the countryside, their wooden wheels creaking beneath baskets of herbs, clay pots, and yes, sealed amphorae that slosh with a very familiar liquid. You nod to the man leading the mule. He nods back like you're both in on some great, mildly embarrassing secret. Today, you're heading uphill toward a district known for its Fulanicae, Roman laundries. If you thought the oral hygiene rituals were intense, wait until you see what they do with togas. The launderers work with vats of urine collected from the public urinals you passed yesterday. Their job, to stomp clothing clean. Literally. You approach the entrance of one such establishment and catch a strong whiff. Eye-watering, nose-burning, absolutely unforgettable. Inside, workers, mostly slaves, stand in waist-deep tubs, rhythmically marching on garments submerged in aged urine. Their calves are impressively muscular. One of them waves. You wave back, mouth closed tightly. A foreman in a blue-streaked tunic offers you a tour. Want to see the whitening process? He asks, like he's showing off a winery. And in a way, he is. There's a system. Soak in urine, rinse with water, beat with sticks, dry in the sun, and finally dust with crushed chalk or sulfur to bleach the fabric to Roman standards of dazzling. And here's the twist. Some of that chalk, it's the same kind used in toothpaste mixtures. The overlap between laundry and dentistry might seem accidental, but in Rome, everything has at least 3 jobs. Historians still argue whether these Fulanicae doubled as informal centers for producing household cleaning products, but many of the ingredients for detergent and dentifrice do seem suspiciously similar. It's like walking into a Roman version of a dollar store. Everything smells like vinegar and has 30 uses. You leave the laundry with your nose feeling slightly violated, but your mind buzzing. How many Romans walked around with clothes and teeth treated by the same concoction? More than you'd expect. Back in the bustling part of his city, a street performer is drawing a crowd by singing a comedic ballad about a man who lost all his teeth to bad rinsing habits and now uses his gums to whistle at girls. You laugh along with the others, reminded that even in ancient times, people used humor to cope with bodily betrayals. As you wander through a shaded garden, a rare quiet pocket in the chaos, you see a group of elderly Romans playing dice and trading tips on oral care. One swears by a nightly rinse of vinegar and fig sap. Another insists on a morning chew of myrrh-soaked bark. A third claims she hasn't had a cavity since she switched to Nubian charcoal paste, though it does make your breath smell like a funeral pyre.
You sit nearby and listen. There's something soothing about the slow rhythm of their conversation, like waves brushing up against the edge of old memories. They speak of remedies passed down, lost ingredients, favorite apothecaries now long gone. It's not just hygiene, it's history, ritual, comfort. One of the women turns to you. "You look like someone who cares about your teeth," she says, the universal Roman opener. She hands you a tiny jar. Inside, a dull gray powder with a faint floral scent. "Lavender ash," she explains. "Very gentle, for when you're feeling delicate." And suddenly the whole dental routine feels like self-care. Not the frantic scrubbing of modern marketing, but a slow, mindful ritual. Pick your scent. Choose your stick. Clean not because you're afraid of decay, but because it makes you feel human. As the sun begins to lower, you walk toward a bathhouse. Not for bathing yet, just to sit in the steam and reflect. Inside, the air smells of eucalyptus and warm stone. Conversations echo softly. A man nearby hums as he cleans his nails with a bronze pick. Another carefully examines his teeth in a polished bronze mirror. You sit with them. You clean your mouth, and you realize Roman dental care wasn't just about survival. It was about dignity, even if your tools were bone and your rinse was pee.
Later that evening, you find yourself drawn to a small, flickering corner of the forum where a crowd has gathered, not for politics or protests, but for a storytelling performance. A white-bearded man, draped in a patchy toga with the air of someone who's lived too many lives to care about laundry, holds court with a tale about a cursed molar. "He was a soldier, see?" the man says, drawing out the words like he's sipping wine. "And the pain, it started on campaign, just after crossing the Rhine. Bit into some barley bread, and snap! The tooth split like a cheap amphora. From then on, every night, the ghost of a Gaul would whisper riddles through the gap." You're pretty sure the entire story is made up, but no one seems to mind. Around you, heads nod, laughter bubbles, and someone passes a flask. Even in the ancient world, oral health is entertainment gold. As you settle onto a bench, lulled by the rhythm of the storyteller's voice, you glance at the crowd. A young woman nearby pulls out a travel-sized chew stick, daintily gnawing the tip as if it were a mint. A toddler waddles past with a tooth-rubbed fig in each hand. An older man chews absent-mindedly on a piece of licorice root, his eyes focused somewhere far beyond the plaza.
Here, dental hygiene isn't hidden behind bathroom doors. It's social, public, even performative. People show off their chew sticks like accessories. Some are carved with initials, others wrapped with threads and bright dyes. A few even have silver inlays, though that's more about status than hygiene. Historians still argue whether these decorated chew sticks were symbols of class or just personal flair. But archaeological digs have uncovered enough variation to suggest Romans liked to make even their oral habits fashion statements. Eventually, the crowd disperses, and you wander into a nearby insula, a Roman apartment block. You're invited up to share supper by a friendly merchant who seems more amused than alarmed by your endless questions. "You've never had boiled dormice?" he asks, horrified, before piling your plate high with, well, mystery meat wrapped in fig leaves. As the family eats, the conversation inevitably drifts to teeth. What hurts, what helps, what got pulled last Saturnalia, and how drunk Uncle Gaius had to be before it happened. There's something oddly comforting about it all. These people talk about molars the way modern families talk about taxes or the weather. Inevitable, mildly painful, sometimes funny. After dinner, the host offers a post-meal cleaning powder. "Fresh from Ephesus," he says proudly, tapping the little tin. "It smells faintly of rosemary and clove. You want a swish or scrub?" You go with swish. He hands you a ceramic cup with a few teaspoons of water and a pinch of powder. You swirl, you wince, you swallow by accident. He shrugs. We all do it once.
One of the children shows you her tooth diary, a little wax tablet where she's recorded which tooth wiggled, which one fell out, and which she fed to the family cat for luck. The Romans didn't have a tooth fairy, but they did have superstitions about lost teeth. Some believed burying them near the hearth ensured strong adult teeth. Others thought burning them released bad spirits. You ask about cavities, and your host pulls out a charm one around the neck, a carved canine tooth from a wild dog, meant to prevent mouth rot. Whether it works is anyone's guess, but hey, modern people wear copper bracelets and eat charcoal gummies, so who are we to judge? The night grows quiet and the household winds down. Before bed, the family performs one last rinse. Boiled fennel water for the children, vinegar and sage for the adults. They sit in a semicircle, sipping and spitting with the synchronized precision of monks in a ritual. You join them, holding the warm cup in your hands, breathing in the steam. You swish, you spit, you smile. It's strangely relaxing. And that's when it hits you. Maybe oral hygiene was never meant to be a rushed, fluorescent lit chore. Maybe it was always meant to be this, a slow, intentional pause in the day, a chance to care for yourself with herbs and laughter, and the quiet knowledge that you're doing your best to keep the rot at bay. In the corner, the mother blows out an oil lamp. Shadows stretch along the walls. Someone hums a lullaby about a dog with gold teeth who barked too loudly and lost them all. As you lay back on a borrowed cushion, your breath tinged with fennel and vinegar, you realize this city runs on amphoras and gossip, on charmed teeth and chewed sticks. And you, strange visitor that you are, fit in just fine. Morning light slants through the slatted shutters, warming your cheeks as the sounds of a waking Rome drift upward. Donkey hooves clop unevenly on the stone streets below. Someone's yelling about stale bread. And a lyre player somewhere is optimistically tuning up for an audience that has not yet had coffee. Not that Romans have coffee. They just have opinions. And, as you're learning, a surprisingly robust routine for mouth care. You sit up slowly, rubbing sleep from your eyes, and find a small clay dish by your bedding, filled with pale powder, and a thin twig resting neatly beside it. Someone's left you a gift. Probably the child with the tooth diary, judging by the faint wax smudge on the edge. You smile and decide to give it a go. The powder today is different. Grainier with a sharper scent. You dip the twig, twist it lightly, and begin brushing. The taste is bitter and slightly metallic, and you catch a whiff of what might be powdered oyster shell. Apparently, Romans believed that crushed marine bits whiten teeth, and while that seems a little extreme, your mouth does feel squeaky. Out in the street, you're bound for the Taberna Medica, the Roman version of a clinic where you're told a dental specialist works a few days a week. On the way, you pass stalls selling everything from spices to carved amulets. One shop has a tray of small ivory tools shaped like fish hooks and curved spoons. Dental picks, the vendor says, casually flipping one. For food. Or demons. Depends on who you ask. Historians still argue whether these implements were strictly dental or multi-purpose, but their presence across multiple Roman sites suggests some serious tooth tinkering was happening. You buy one, partly for curiosity, partly for the cool factor. At the clinic, a line of people waits beneath a faded awning. A teenage boy clutches his cheek and moans dramatically. An old man with no teeth at all seems to be here just for company. When it's your turn, the medicus greets you with the cheery indifference of someone who's seen every molar configuration under the sun. He inspects your mouth with a bronze mirror, taps a few teeth with what looks like a repurposed tent peg, and offers you a chew stick steeped in mint and goat bile. You politely decline. The clinic itself is surprisingly well equipped. Shelves line the walls, holding everything from jars of herbs to curious stone molds used for setting broken jaws. There's even a collection of replacement teeth, small ivory pegs and gold wire bridges, some of them shockingly intricate. The idea of getting a root canal here is, well, let's just say you'd need an amphora of wine and an iron constitution. Instead, the medicus gives you a parchment scroll with a few recommended mouth tonics. One involves steeping crushed coriander seeds and honey in warm wine. Another involves a rather bold combination of mouse droppings and garlic, something you plan to never ever try. Still, the fact that these recipes exist at all tells you something. Romans didn't just deal with pain, they tried to prevent it. Preventive care wasn't some modern invention. It was just messier and a lot more pungent. As you leave the clinic, you pass a group of women outside a perfume shop. They're laughing over a new tooth powder blend, rose petal ash mixed with myrrh and a touch of salt. It's being marketed as kiss-worthy. You consider buying some, if only to see what rose-flavored grit tastes like.
Midday now, and you duck into a shaded courtyard to escape the heat. You find a quiet spot by a trickling fountain, watching as a small boy proudly teaches his younger sister how to properly scrape her tongue with a seashell. She mimics him, scrunching her face in disgust, but does it anyway. Because Romans believed cleanliness wasn't just for the gods, it was for everyone. It's during this quiet moment that a curious old woman approaches you. "You've got the look," she says, peering into your face. "The look of someone who's swallowed too much vinegar." You laugh. She doesn't. "I'm a dental witch," she whispers, glancing around theatrically. "Not official, of course, but I know the herbs." She offers to read your mouth aura, which involves sniffing your breath, tapping your cheeks, and muttering what you're 80% sure is a shopping list. Her verdict? Too much hot humor. You need cooling herbs, fennel, mint, and river clay. You nod solemnly. She smiles, revealing 4 teeth total. "You'll live," she says, "but chew slowly." She gives you a small pouch of her homemade blend before tottering off. You promise to try it, eventually. As the afternoon wears on, you wander through a quieter residential area, where even the fountains seem to babble more softly. A family sits in the shade, brushing their teeth together with synchronized movements, as if it were a dance. The father explains that doing it together keeps the children from skipping their turn, and the children, giggling and spitting into the grass, seem genuinely delighted. There's something beautiful about it, this collective pause, this ordinary moment of care passed down from parent to child, like a lullaby. And you, modern traveler that you are, sit on a worn marble step with a chew stick in one hand and a rose mint powder tin in the other, and realize you're starting to feel Roman.
By late afternoon, your feet have carried you down a quieter avenue, lined with poplars, their leaves rattling like distant whispers in the breeze. You pass a bathhouse that steams gently, exhaling mint and lavender into the air, and you make a mental note to return there soon, not just for the hot plunge, but because the gossip floating out of that place is better than any newspaper. But first, your curiosity pulls you toward a different sort of establishment. A small apothecary, wedged between a fabric shop and a bread stall, its door frame shaded with hanging herbs. Inside, it smells like a wet pantry collided with a spice bazaar,
camphor, myrrh, clove, vinegar, and something suspiciously like roasted eel. You're greeted by an older woman with bright eyes and absolutely no interest in your name. "Let me see your gums," she says, as though that's just how conversations begin here. You oblige, and she nods approvingly. "Pinkish red, not bleeding. That's a good start. You chew?" "Occasionally," you reply. "Not enough," she says. Reaching behind the counter, she produces a curious little pouch stitched with faded blue thread. Inside are what look like tiny dried peas. "Mastic gum," she says, "from the island of Chios. Been chewing it since the reign of Augustus. Tastes like pine. Works like a charm." You pop one into your mouth. It starts off hard like a pebble, but soon softens into a chewy resin that releases a sharp, earthy tang. It's both bitter and oddly addictive. You keep chewing, your jaw working in slow, sleepy rhythm. It's like a mouthful of forest.
She tells you that Romans believed mastic not only freshened breath, but warded off toothaches, cleansed the body, and, perhaps optimistically, cured flatulence. Modern science may raise an eyebrow at that last one, but the rest isn't far off. Historians still argue whether mastic was mainly used as breath freshener, dental aid, or cosmetic chew, but either way, it became a staple among the hygiene conscious. It even turns up in letters from Roman women complaining when their stash ran out. Imagine a world where dental gum was worthy of diplomatic correspondence. You thank the apothecary and step back into the street, where golden hour sunlight has turned the paving stones into glowing tablets. Your jaw is still rhythmically working the mastic, and somehow it's grounding, like walking meditation, but for your mouth. You stroll toward the river, and near a bustling bridge, you spot a group of young men debating something. Not politics, not philosophy. Molars. One is waving around a bone model of a mouth, enthusiastically pointing to different teeth while quoting Pliny the Elder. "They curve inward like a boar's," he says, "because the gods knew we'd need leverage for bread crust." His friend disagrees. "No, they're shaped for olives. Chew one the wrong way, and your bicuspid will curse your children." You don't interrupt. You just watch, because here in Rome, dental debates aren't dull, they're practically sport.
Nearby, a girl is selling tooth charms on a woven mat. Little carved pendants shaped like canines and incisors, some made from bronze, others from bone or clay. She tells you they're good luck, especially if you've just lost the tooth or survived a rough extraction. "They keep the pain ghosts away," she says with a shrug. Pain ghosts. Of course, you buy one immediately. Later, at a small gathering hosted by a local poet who has 5 teeth, all accounted for, you sip warm mulled wine and listen to readings about the aching soul mirrored in an aching jaw. It's half beautiful, half ridiculous, and the crowd applauds like he's just recited Virgil. The poet passes around a dish of fennel seeds meant to cleanse the breath. You chew politely, though the seeds explode with flavor and make your eyes water. Someone chuckles at your reaction. Roman hygiene is a kind of trial by spice? By now, your pockets are full of tooth-related souvenirs. A chew stick wrapped in purple thread, a tin of coral powder, a tiny scroll with a recipe for mouthwash that includes boiled cabbage water and a prayer to Fortuna. As twilight deepens, you wander the outskirts of a small market garden. A woman is trimming her mint plants by lantern light. You ask her if she sells them for cooking. "Cooking," she snorts, "these are for teeth." She shows you how to crush the leaves into a paste and smear it on sore gums. And if the pain's bad, she adds, you chew one and curse quietly under your breath. It doesn't heal it, but it helps.
There's something so fundamentally human in that. Not every cure has to be effective, as long as it gives you something to do while you wait for the pain to pass. As stars begin to appear above the rooftops, you make your way back through Rome's winding lanes, past shuttered shops and flickering oil lamps. Your jaw's still working that bit of mastic, the resin now mellow and sticky. You're not sure it's doing anything medicinal, but it feels right. You arrive back at the insula, greeted by the familiar creak of the stair and the comforting scent of dinner's remains. Someone left a fresh cup of fennel water on your cushion. You sip it slowly, letting the flavor linger. And just before you close your eyes, you tuck the little bone tooth charm beneath your makeshift pillow. Because here, in this strange, aching, fragrant world, even dreams have something to chew on.
Morning finds you waking to the subtle clatter of amphora being stacked in the alleyway below, and the gentle hum of Rome stretching her limbs for another day of commerce, noise, and inventive body odor. As you yawn and stretch on your straw-filled mattress, you take a moment to feel your jaw. No pain. The mastic might actually be working. Or perhaps you've simply become one with the ache. Like a Roman Stoic, but with better oral hygiene. You wash your face with cool water and crunch a fennel seed between your teeth for courage. Then head out once more, this time with a new objective. Toothbrushes, or the Roman equivalent thereof. Your first stop is an open-air stall that smells unmistakably like licorice. There, a young vendor is arranging bundles of twigs tied with ribbon. Egyptian roots, he says proudly. Salvadora persica. Imported, of course, the best chew sticks in the empire. You pick one up, noticing the faintly sweet scent, the tapered ends already softened and frayed. He explains that once chewed, these sticks function like tiny toothbrushes, abrasive enough to scrub, but gentle on the gums. The trick is in the fibers. Nature's bristles, he calls them. Historians still debate whether chew sticks came to Rome directly through Egyptian trade or arrived via Persia and the Silk routes, but by your time in the city, they're quite the fashionable accessory. Some are even dyed purple, a shade reserved for the rich, or those pretending to be. You test one out as you wander. Chew, chew, scrape. It's oddly satisfying. A small boy walks by chewing one too, hands sticky with honey, and you nod to each other like secret members of the Fresh Breath Society. Next, you're lured by a luxurious bathhouse known for its exotic beauty treatments. Inside, marble glistens with condensation, and someone is whisper singing a bawdy epic poem in the corner. You sign up for the Tooth Glow service, because why not?
An attendant leads you to a small side room where a paste is prepared using ground coral, burnt deer antler, vinegar, and a touch of rose oil. It smells complicated. She applies it with what looks like a bent bronze spoon. You resist the urge to giggle, mostly. Don't rinse, she instructs. Let it marinate. As your teeth tingle gently with acidic enthusiasm, you realize how far Romans will go for the illusion of brightness. Teeth weren't always expected to be pearly white, but those who could afford it certainly preferred not to look like they'd been gnawing charcoal. Later, as you sip mint tea with a merchant from Carthage, you trade dental horror stories. He shares that in North Africa, crushed seashell paste is a common cleanser. Painful, but effective. You counter with your coral glow experience. He winces in sympathy and offers a fig as a reparation. In the Sabura district, where the streets narrow and the buildings lean like gossiping neighbors, you find a back alley dental shop, or at least something pretending to be one. A painted sign above the door shows a smiling centurion missing exactly 3 teeth. Inside, a man in a tunic stained with something you hope is wine offers consultations. You sit. He pokes at your gums with what looks like a fishbone and asks, "Do you grind at night?" "Not since the lions," you reply, unhelpfully. He chuckles. "Let me show you something." He pulls out a drawer full of tiny implements,
scrapers, picks, even a bronze drill. Yes, a drill. It is both fascinating and deeply threatening. We use this, he explains, for the brave ones. You are not that brave. Instead, you inquire about brushing techniques. He demonstrates a circular motion using a linen rag dipped in vinegar and crushed charcoal. Don't scrub too hard, he warns, unless you want your teeth to file themselves into fashionable nubs.
You thank him profusely and leave with a small jar of tooth powder, a linen cloth, and a profound sense of gratitude for modern dentistry. As you meander toward a shaded colonnade, you notice a priestess of Vesta carefully rinsing her mouth with salt water. Ritual purity, she explains. The mouth must be clean before prayers, physically and spiritually. It strikes you that oral hygiene in Rome isn't just cosmetic. It's woven into status, ritual, medicine, and even superstition. You overhear one woman advising another to never brush after sunset. It invites tooth demons, apparently. They travel by moonlight, she says solemnly. You quietly chew another piece of mastic, just to be safe. At a tea house near the Forum, a playwright regales his companions with a joke. A Gaul, a Greek, and a Roman walk into a barber shop. The Gaul asks for a beard trim, the Greek for a haircut, and the Roman says, "Just pull the rotten ones." The group erupts in sleepy laughter. By evening, you're back at your insula, testing your new linen and charcoal routine with the gentlest brushing motion imaginable. Your reflection in a polished bronze mirror smiles back, slightly gritty, but very Roman. You light a small oil lamp and stretch out on your cot. As you stare at the ceiling beams, you imagine all the chew sticks, powders, and pastes of the empire working tirelessly to hold back the decay of time. And you wonder, centuries from now, will someone look at a modern toothbrush with the same bemused curiosity? Probably. And they'll still hate flossing. The next morning begins with a knock at your door. A gentle tap, tap, tap that could only belong to your newsy neighbor Flavia, who always finds a reason to stop by when she smells your breakfast gruel warming up. This time, however, she brings an offering, a tiny terracotta pot wrapped in wool. "Toothpaste," she says proudly, as if unveiling a relic. "Made it myself. Goat ash, mint oil, and, well, let's just say it's better if you don't ask." You thank her, promising to try it later. You won't, and she leaves after delivering an enthusiastic lecture on molar maintenance and her cousin's halitosis. Eager to escape further discussion of family breath woes, you head toward the market to explore an angle of oral hygiene less talked about: diet. After all, as the local philosopher at the bathhouse muttered yesterday between sips of barley water, we are what we chew. The Roman diet, it turns out, is both friend and foe to teeth. On one hand, it's full of coarse, fibrous food. Think lentils, barley bread, and crunchy legumes that naturally scours teeth while chewing. On the other hand, the frequent presence of grit in flour, thanks to millstones made of volcanic rock, means you're basically sandpapering your enamel 3 meals a day. Historians still argue whether the average Roman suffered more from cavities or from worn-down teeth due to grit, but the archaeological evidence certainly leans toward the latter. Ancient skeletons often show flat, ground-down molars that look like someone's been using them to polish marble.
You pause at a stall selling sesame honey balls. Delicious, but sticky. The vendor assures you, good for the heart, bad for the teeth. But we all have to die of something, right? You buy 2. As you nibble, a nearby spice merchant overhears your inquiry about dental foods and leans in conspiratorially.
"Want something that makes your breath smell divine?" he whispers, offering a small pouch of roasted aniseed. You pop a few in your mouth. Licorice meets black pepper meets ancient wisdom. Surprisingly effective. Wandering further into the food quarter, you notice a cluster of physicians huddled under a striped awning, debating the benefits of vinegar rinses. One of them, a young Galen admirer with overly plucked eyebrows, insists that vinegar sharpens the mind as well as the teeth. His older colleague retorts, "Yes, it sharpens them right into the gums." You smile politely and slink away before becoming part of the demonstration. At a wine bar tucked behind a row of laurel trees, you chat with an ex-legionary who claims to have used stale bread crusts as a toothbrush while marching through Germania. "Bite, chew, spit, worked like a charm," he says, revealing a grin that's 40% teeth, 60% bravado. This reminds you to investigate Roman watermouths, and so you trek across the city to a perfumer's apothecary known for crafting aromatic waters used not only to scent the body, but also to rinse the mouth. She lets you sniff a few concoctions, one with cinnamon, myrrh, and thyme, another laced with vinegar and burnt fig. It's all quite invigorating. You purchase a small vial and test it on the spot. It burns. Like betrayal. But your breath now smells like an ancient spice market, so you count it as a win. Nearby, a group of children are playing a game that involves tossing dried beans into a helmet. One of them suddenly yells, "Tooth thee!" and the others cheer. You learn that some Roman children, like their modern counterparts, believe in a spirit that rewards lost teeth. Though instead of a fairy, it's a small house deity called Manes Minor. Offer the tooth to him with a whisper and a coin, and you might grow a stronger one in return. You ponder how universal the hope is, that when something falls out, something better comes in its place. As dusk falls, you meet an elderly woman selling herbal bundles. She tells you she once worked as a midwife and used to rub infants' gums with honey and crushed thyme to soothe teething pains. Worked every time, she winks, though the mothers usually ended up eating most of the honey. You ask her what she used to clean her own teeth. She shrugs, prayer, and wine. That night, as you sit on the rooftop with a cup of watered-down Falernian wine and the city glows below like a bowl of embers, you reflect on the strange variety of methods the Romans employed to preserve their smiles. From vinegar potions and coral dust to burnt bread and prayers to kitchen gods, it's all a patchwork of ingenuity, superstition, and trial and error. You chew another aniseed, now fully converted, and gaze at the stars. Somewhere out there, in another age, someone is probably rinsing with blue mouthwash and feeling superior. They probably still don't floss either. Tonight, you've accepted an invitation to dine with a senator. Well, a retired senator, who now fancies himself a philosopher, olive farmer, and amateur dentist. His villa is perched just beyond the city walls, nestled among fig trees and the low croak of frogs in the distance. A slave meets you at the gate and offers a lavender-scented towel. You consider wiping your teeth with it, but resist. Inside, the atrium is dimly lit by flickering oil lamps, casting golden shadows on mosaic floors depicting sea monsters, grapevines, and one slightly cross-eyed Apollo. You're ushered into the triclinium, the Roman dining room, where guests recline on couches and sip watered wine. Your host is already deep into a story about his father's tooth abscess. Swelled up like a pomegranate, had to lance it with a chicken bone, he says cheerfully, tearing into a honey-roasted dormouse, as though nothing could be more natural. The meal is an education in Roman cuisine. Garum-soaked vegetables, peppered lentils, and a dish involving boiled sow's udder. Chewy, but oddly comforting. You notice something strange as people eat. Most pick their teeth constantly, using bronze or ivory toothpicks, which they carry like pens. Toothpicks, it turns out, are social currency. A person's status can often be judged by the material of their pick. You're handed one made of olive wood. It feels artisanal. Across the couch, a merchant from Hispania taps his own gold toothpick against his cup as he explains his theory. The real danger isn't rot, it's worms, tiny mouth worms, invisible to the eye. You nearly choke on your grape.
Historians still argue whether Romans truly believed in dental worms or if this was more metaphor than medicine. But Pliny the Elder certainly mentions them, and some treatments, including smoke inhalation through a hollow root, were supposedly designed to drive them out. The merchant offers you a sip of his worm-repellent tincture, which tastes like rosemary and regret. After the meal, guests gather in the peristyle garden for post-prandial conversation and some mild bragging about personal health. A retired centurion claims he's never lost a tooth. "Because I never ate figs," he declares proudly, as if this were common knowledge. No one dares question him. Your host, eager to show off his latest acquisition, disappears momentarily and returns with a curious artifact, a glass jar containing a creamy paste, allegedly from Alexandria. He holds it like treasure. You all take turns sniffing it. It smells of cardamom, charcoal, and something that might be powdered oyster shell. He insists on letting you try it. The texture is gritty, but luxurious, like exfoliating your gums with Cleopatra's own secrets. You nod with appreciation and try not to grimace. As the evening stretches on, the conversation turns, inevitably, to aging. A matron with silver hair and very pink cheeks, surely some kind of wine blush, declares that losing one's teeth is a sign of wisdom, and she's happy to chew boiled carrots for the rest of her days. Her husband mutters something about gumming through steak that nobody wants to hear. You recline deeper into the cushions, belly full and teeth slightly numb. The stars are out now, and the warm air smells faintly of olive smoke and citronella.
One guest, half asleep, mumbles a story about a temple in Ephesus where people used to leave their teeth as offerings, buried beneath the floor, wrapped in wax. You ask the gods for strength, he says, and offer what you've lost. That idea lingers with you. Teeth not just as functional tools or signs of beauty, but as sacred things, worthy of ritual, sacrifice, remembrance. Perhaps oral hygiene isn't just about cleaning. It's about honoring the little bones that do so much. Before you leave, your host presses a small clay jar into your hands. My own recipe, he says. Ash, salt, a touch of thyme, morning and night with devotion. You thank him and promise to use it, though it's going straight into your curiosities bag, alongside the mastic, chew sticks, vinegar tinctures, and a single roasted sesame ball you saved for later. Walking home through quiet streets lit only by moonlight and flickering torches, you think back on the day, the absurd conversations, the persistent obsession with worm theory, the aroma of herb-laced pastes and burnt coral dust, all of it forming a surprisingly tender portrait of a people trying to outwit decay with creativity, ritual, and a little bit of bravado. You pass a statue of Hygieia, goddess of cleanliness, and give her a respectful nod. Her stone smile seems just a little brighter under the stars.
This morning begins not with breakfast, but with a riddle from your neighbor's parrot. What's long, white, and falls out when you lie too much? It squawks. Before you can answer, the bird answers itself. Your teeth! And then lets out a triumphant caw-caw that sounds suspiciously like laughter. You have to admit, for all their oddities, Romans do love their oral metaphors. Toothless is a favorite insult, used not only for the elderly, but for politicians who've lost their influence. And to smile like a Greek apparently means to flash too many teeth, which some Romans find unseemly. Today, you're heading into the bustling Subura district, Rome's noisy, grimy underbelly, and the perfect place to dig into the more practical, street-level side of dental life. You keep one hand on your pouch, the other shading your eyes from the mid-morning sun. The scent of sizzling onions, stale wine, and maybe a dash of open sewer greets you like an old, chaotic friend. Your first stop is a barber's stall, not just for trimming hair and scraping beards, but also a center for minor medical procedures. Today's sign advertises teeth pulled clean, no screaming, guaranteed, or extra denarii refunded. You watch as a customer climbs into the chair. The barber, with a smirk and tongs that look more suited to blacksmithing, extracts a molar in under 30 seconds. The patient howls anyway. Historically, there's debate about whether barbers or physicians handled most extractions. Some say barbers did the bulk of it, while wealthier citizens preferred a private doctor. But archaeologists have uncovered specialized dental tools from both professions, evidence that oral health crossed class lines, even if the pain tolerance didn't.
After the extraction, the barber rinses his tongs and vinegar and goes right back to shaving a senator's neck. You quietly decide not to ask for a trim. Further down the alley, you stumble into a small shrine dedicated to Cloacina, goddess of sewers and cleanliness. Someone has placed a worn ivory tooth at the foot of the statue, wrapped in wool string. A humble offering? Or perhaps just trash mistaken for ritual? Hard to say. You duck into a nearby herb shop, drawn by a display of jaw-shaped soap bars. The shopkeeper greets you with a smile full of crooked charm and offers a sample of her tooth flowers, tiny sachets filled with dried mint, fennel, and myrtle. "To them," she says. "Swish with water, spit toward the west." You ask why the west. She shrugs. Because spitting east is rude. Inside the shop, rows of clay jars line the shelves. Some are labeled in elegant Latin script, Pulvis dentarius, Salis carbonis, Vinum rossium. You recognize some ingredients: crushed oyster shells, fennel seed, and ashes from goat hooves, each promising fresher breath, stronger enamel, or divine protection from mouthworms. You try a sample rinse. It burns your gums, but your breath could probably knock out a centurion. Progress. A few blocks away, in a courtyard filled with stray cats and laundry lines, a midwife offers an impromptu lecture on childhood teething rituals. "We hang wolf teeth above the cradle," she explains. "Keeps the pain away, scares off bad spirits." She pats a young boy's head and adds, "And never let the first baby tooth fall to the floor. That's how you get weak feet." This intertwining of dental care and superstition isn't surprising. Romans saw the body as a microcosm of the god's order, and teeth, especially, as signs of fate. White, straight teeth meant the gods favored you. Black, broken ones? Clearly you had angered someone divine. Historians still argue whether the many charms, amulets, and prayers surrounding oral health were truly believed or just tradition. But it's clear they mattered. Teeth were health, beauty, status, and luck, all wrapped in enamel and mystery. On your way home, you spot a group of teenagers laughing around a vendor who sells painted teeth charms, little enamel pendants shaped like molars, canines, even the elusive wisdom tooth. "Wear it and never lose another," the vendor says, as if he's selling destiny. You buy one, just in case. As dusk settles, you return to your neighborhood and run into Flavia again, who's now decided her toothpaste needs rebranding. I'm calling it Dentum Vitae, life for the teeth. You tell her it has a certain ring to it. She beams. Tomorrow, I'll start selling it at the bathhouse. That evening, back in your room, you light a small oil lamp and lay out your growing collection. The vinegar rinse, the ivory pick, the mint flowers, the lucky molar charm. Each item tells a story, not just of how Romans cleaned their teeth, but how they thought about them. Not just tools, but tokens. Not just habits, but hope. And as you chew your aniseeds and watch the lamplight flicker, you begin to understand that even in this ancient world, amidst grime and grit, there is a strange poetry in the way people chase health. Not always pretty, rarely perfect, but entirely human. By now, your Roman mornings have settled into a sort of routine. Wake to the cawing of that judgmental parrot next door, rinse your mouth with that vaguely spicy vinegar tonic, and grind your teeth lightly on fennel seeds as you stretch beneath the tiled ceiling. But today, your plans take you beyond the city walls, to the countryside, where Rome's quieter citizens live, die, and leave behind secrets. You're heading to a necropolis. The journey out of the city is surprisingly scenic. Rolling hills dotted with sheep, farmers shouting in sing-song Latin, and the faint clink of a blacksmith shaping something ominous but rhythmic in the distance. You pass rows of tombs, many decorated with smiling busts that, frankly, seem a little too enthusiastic about being dead. Others are more modest, stone boxes, etched names, and sometimes a clay mask bearing a likeness of the deceased. But you're not here to pay respects. You're here to examine teeth. At the edge of a shaded grove, you meet a group of antiquarians, early archaeologists really, who've been excavating an Etruscan tomb. They've unearthed several skeletons, carefully brushed clean, resting like museum exhibits in the grass. The team, dressed in loose tunics and wide-brim hats, is currently debating over a molar. One man holds it aloft like a rare gem. See the wear pattern? This person chewed a lot of grain, hard bread maybe, unleavened. Another snorts. Now, that's erosion from acidic fruit, probably pomegranates. A third chimes in, or maybe they just had terrible posture and ground their teeth. Historians still argue whether Roman diets caused more harm than help to dental health. Some skeletons show remarkable preservation, with intact arches of pristine enamel. Others look like they bit into lava. The difference might lie in class, region, or just sheer dental luck. As you wander between tombs, you overhear a fascinating fact. One of the skeletons belonged to a woman who had her teeth inlaid with gold filigree, not decorative, but to bind cracked molars back together. Early dental repair, centuries ahead of its time. And yet, no written record of this practice exists. Just teeth, quietly outliving their owners. Another tomb, more worn and overgrown, contains the remains of what seems to be a gladiator. His teeth are chipped, several missing, and his jaw shows signs of repeated trauma. Probably not from combat, someone says. More likely training accidents, or maybe clenching during stress. You imagine him pacing before a match, biting down with fear, jaw rigid as he waited for the signal.
Dental stress, it turns out, isn't a modern invention. You spot another skeleton nearby, a teenager whose enamel bears marks of repetitive scraping. One of the scholars notes could be self-inflicted, or a chewing habit, some kind of anxiety response. Even in death, these mouths speak, not with words, but with wear. They reveal what no scroll ever tells you: who ate well, who starved, who chewed date pits or walnut shells or olive stones because hunger doesn't care about your molars. You sit beside a weathered statue of Mercury and rest for a moment, chewing a pine nut thoughtfully. Around you, toothless skulls grin from the earth like they're in on the joke.
One scholar approaches, wiping his hands on a dusty linen cloth. He offers you a theory, whispered like gossip. In some tombs, we found what looked like dental kits. Tiny tools, wrapped in cloth, buried with the body. Perhaps for use in the afterlife. You raise an eyebrow. Or maybe just sentiment? He nods. Hard to say, but it tells us something. They cared. You reflect on that as you help pack up the site. One of the younger assistants offers you a small object wrapped in cloth, a replica of a Roman toothpick carved from jet. Not real, obviously, just a token. You accept it gratefully. Another addition for your growing cabinet of dental curiosities. On the road back to Rome, the air turns cooler and you find yourself mulling over the paradox of Roman hygiene. They had no toothbrushes, no dental floss, no fluoride. And yet, they obsessed over their teeth. Through superstition, spices, ash in vinegar, they build a kind of spiritual dentistry, as focused on ritual as on results. At the city gates, you pass a fruit vendor hawking dates and dried figs. You pause, eye the tough, chewy skins, and decide against it. Tonight, you'll soak your mouth in rose water instead. Let your teeth rest from the day's knowledge. Because in this strange journey of ancient smiles, it's not just about what they did to clean their teeth, but how much meaning they placed in the simple act of keeping them.
Back within the familiar din of Rome, you're greeted once again by Flavia's voice ringing from her corner near the bathhouse. Good evening. Dentum vitae now comes in 3 cents: laurel, rosemary, and goat's milk. You nod politely and make a mental note to avoid goat-based oral care for at least a week. Tonight, you've been invited to an elegant dinner party on the Aventine Hill, one of those gatherings where senators slouch dramatically on couches, poets recite odes nobody really listens to, and the wine flows until everyone forgets which province they govern. You arrive with freshly rinsed breath, a polished ivory toothpick tucked into your belt, and a hunger for both food and casual anthropology. As the banquet begins, you recline alongside a dozen other guests on plush cushions. Slaves bustle about with trays of honeyed dormice, oysters, olives, and jellied fish. Between mouthfuls, you start observing the subtle dental rituals of Rome's elite. You notice how nearly everyone uses a stylus-like pick between courses, some carved from bone, others glittering with bronze tips. These are dentiscalpium, essential dinner companions for those too dignified to chew discreetly. A few guests use perfumed cloths to dab at their gums, murmuring mint oil aids digestion. One elderly patrician drops his denture, yes, denture, into a bowl of diluted wine for cleansing. There's debate among scholars as to how common dentures were in ancient Rome. We know some were made from ivory or human teeth, tied together with gold wire, but they were likely expensive and uncomfortable. Whether these were worn for actual eating or just show remains uncertain. Still, the presence of false teeth at this dinner suggests status. Not just an attempt at chewing, but a declaration, I can afford teeth, real or not.
Between courses, conversation shifts to love poetry, grain tariffs, and a new trend where wealthy citizens hire Greek tutors to teach parrots rude phrases. You chip in a comment about the hygienic use of fennel and are immediately mistaken for a physician. Tell me, a guest slurs slightly, is it true that mouse brains whiten the teeth? You pause. Only if harvested under a full moon. Everyone laughs, but if you actually jot it down. The main course arrives. Flamingo tongue on fig compote, a delicacy favored by emperors and dentists alike, because it's soft and unlikely to chip a tooth. As you chew carefully, your host leans in to whisper a strange tale. You know, Nero, he begins, eyes darting, swore by a paste made of pearl dust and pine sap, claimed it made his teeth shine like Venus in winter. You raise an eyebrow. Did it work? The host grins, showing off a row of golden caps. Hard to say. He also thought he was a god. This blend of vanity and health obsession is very Roman. While they lacked germ theory, they certainly believed in balance of the humors, the elements, and apparently the teeth. Clean teeth to them weren't just aesthetic. They were a sign that your inner harmony was in check. Later in the evening, a performer arrives, an old woman with a tambourine and a comedic monologue. Her best joke? I once dated a gladiator. He smiled, and I realized he kept his teeth in his purse. The room erupts. Even Flavia, who snuck in with a tray of samples, snickers into her rosemary-scented sleeve. One of the final courses is candied pine nut cake, sweet enough to rot your enamel on sight. Several guests discreetly rinse their mouths with herbal water between bites. You join in, noting the subtle sting of sage and vinegar. The host sees you and nods approvingly. Good instincts, he says. A clean mouth, a clear mind. Then adds, also fewer worms. Yes, dental parasites were a common fear. Some Romans believed that small, invisible creatures lived in the gums, nibbling away at enamel, unless pacified with rituals, rinses, or prayers to the appropriate deity. Was this metaphor or medical guesswork? Historians still argue whether these toothworms were just plaque explained poetically or something more sinister, believed quite literally. As the party winds down, reclining turns to reclining in place. A few guests have passed out, others hum along with the lyre player in the corner. You gather your things and quietly step into the cool night air. Outside, the moonlight catches the marble columns, making them look almost translucent. You think about the absurdity and brilliance of what you've witnessed. How much effort goes into caring for something as small and fragile as a tooth? And how, even here, among the powerful and decadent, it's still something people worry about, hide, show off, try to preserve. You stroll home slowly, mouth still tingling faintly from the herbal rinse. In your little rented room, you pull out the toothpick gift from the countryside dig and place it beside your vinegar bottle and mint pouch. The collection grows. This morning, the sun filters through your window like melted honey, and you wake with the pleasant realization that your teeth feel oddly clean. Perhaps it was the sage rinse, or maybe it's the smug satisfaction of watching a room full of elites floss with styluses while you pretended to be a dental scholar. Either way, you stretch, rinse with mint water, and prepare for a new kind of adventure, not in tombs or dinner parties, but in the bustling Roman forum itself.
Because if you want to know how the average Roman thought about teeth, you need to go where average Romans shout about everything: the marketplace. Your sandals slap against cobblestone as you wander into the chaos. Voices collide like gladiators, hawkers selling figs, philosophers arguing about stoicism versus hedonism, and a suspiciously loud man claiming to have invented toothpaste made from Egyptian secrets. Naturally, you approach him. He's dressed in a tunic too clean to be trustworthy and holds up a small ceramic jar. Only 2 denarii for the secret to a goddess's smile. You ask what's inside. He opens the jar with a flourish. The smell hits you like a chariot. Sour goat's milk, charcoal, something vaguely minty. Guaranteed to whiten, he adds. You don't buy it, but you do note how many people linger to listen. Dental care, it turns out, sells. You stroll past more stalls, one with imported cinnamon bark, rumored to freshen the breath, another displaying what look like polished stones but turn out to be old teeth set in jewelry. They belonged to lovers, or enemies, hard to tell after the funeral.
Historians still argue whether Romans truly believed that wearing another's tooth gave you strength, or if it was just macabre fashion. Either way, it's clear that teeth weren't just for eating or smiling. They were tokens, talismans, even currency in some circles. Near the public fountain, you spot a scruffy man squatting with a bag of tools. He doesn't call out like the others. He just waits. Eventually, someone sits beside him, a soldier with a swollen cheek and a wince in his eye. Without a word, the man pulls out a bronze pick, a cloth, and what looks like a mallet. You wince too. This is a dentifrice, a kind of back-alley tooth puller. While some Romans could afford physicians or Greek-trained healers, many had no choice but to visit the market barber-dentist. These men worked quickly, quietly, and often with more enthusiasm than precision. The soldier groans once, then again, and then there's a wet, cracking sound. You look away. Just in time to avoid witnessing a fragment of what was once a molar drop into a bronze bowl. The dentifrice wraps the gap with linen, hands the man a small pouch of mint leaves, and collects his fee. No small talk, no philosophy, just pain and payment. A young woman standing nearby notices your grimace. "First time seeing a street pull?" she asks. You nod. She shrugs. "Better than letting the rot spread to the jaw. My aunt died that way." You blink. "Sorry?" She waves it off. "It happens, but hey, no tooth, no lies. That's what my uncle always said." You make a note of the phrase. Add it to your growing lexicon of Roman oral wisdom. Further along, in a quieter alley, you stumble upon something entirely different. A small shrine, tucked between 2 bathhouses. Inside, offerings line a marble shelf, baby teeth wrapped in wool, wax models of jaws, and clay figurines clutching what look like tiny toothbrushes. This is a shrine to Fabulinus, the Roman deity associated with a child's first words, and by extension, the arrival and sometimes loss of teeth. Mothers bring offerings here in the hope of easing teething pain or thanking the gods for healthy development. It's a tender, personal contrast to the tooth-pulling horror you just witnessed. One elderly woman notices you staring and hands you a little wax jaw. "Offer it," she says softly. "You've got teeth, don't you?" You nod and place the model on the altar. Not because you believe, but because something about it feels kind. There's a quiet dignity in this ritual,
a recognition that even the smallest part of us, something as mundane as a tooth, can carry meaning, memory, and magic. You leave the forum with a pouch of mint, a head full of images, and a newfound respect for the resilience of the Roman mouth. Whether through painful extractions, mystic pastes, or whispered prayers, people here have found ways to cope. Your own teeth feel a little looser now. Maybe it's in your head. Maybe it's the power of suggestion. Or maybe Rome has a way of getting into your bones, starting from the jaw up. Either way, tonight you'll sleep with a fresh sprig of fennel beside your bed, just in case.
You wake to the gentle clatter of carts outside, the faint whiff of bread baking somewhere nearby, and the unmistakable taste of yesterday's fig wine lingering on your tongue. Brushing sleep from your eyes and fennel crumbs from your pillow, you remember today's destination, the medical district near the Tiber, where more scholarly minds poke at molars with ink-stained fingers and confidently misquote Hippocrates. After your usual morning rinse, a swish of vinegar and mint, you head off, sandals slapping softly in the morning haze. The district is quieter than the Forum, but no less chaotic in its own special way. Here, the air smells like boiled herbs, aged parchment, and faint panic. You pass doorways etched with Greek lettering and shelves lined with copper instruments, whose exact functions you're not entirely sure you want to understand. You finally find the practice of Scribonius Largus, one of the empire's more respected medical minds, or at least one of the louder ones. He welcomes you in with a proud grin, half genuine, half performance, and points to a reclining couch near a small table of scrolls and salves. Most problems, he begins, begin in the gut, or the teeth, sometimes both. I recommend we clean your mouth and then purge your spleen, just to be sure. You politely decline the spleen purge and instead ask about Roman medical thinking on dental care. Scribonius leans in, clearly delighted to explain. He've compiled a great many remedies, some borrowed from the Greeks, others from the gods, and a few, he adds with a whisper, from slaves who used to be dentists.
You learn that the Roman medical community took oral care quite seriously, at least when it came to preserving health, if not comfort. Galen, the Greek physician whose writings many Romans revered, claimed that digestion begins in the mouth, making clear teeth essential for good humoral balance. This was the logic behind using mouthwashes made from vinegar, wine, salt water, or even stale urine. Ammonia, Scribonius says proudly, cleanses the mouth and lifts the spirit. You smile weakly and make a mental note to double-check that one later. In his scrolls, you find detailed recipes for all kinds of dental treatments. Powdered pumice stone mixed with honey to polish enamel, crushed myrrh to soothe sore gums, even ground up mouse teeth. Yes, again, to be applied as a paste for abscesses. Scribonius admits the mouse thing might be more superstition than science, but it's in the scroll, so we try it at least once. He lets you hold one of his dental probes, a slender bronze instrument with a slight hook. It feels too elegant to be used for pain, but Scribonius assures you that it's been inside at least 20 mouths, some of them still attached to the owner at the time. You also learn about an emerging theory, popular among some Roman physicians, that tooth decay comes from an imbalance in bodily fluids, too much black bile or corrupted phlegm. This idea, adapted from Hippocratic thought, explains why some treatments include purging, bleeding, or odd dietary restrictions. No dates, only lentils and boiled lettuce for a fortnight. Whether that helps teeth or just keeps people too bored to chew remains unclear. As you browse the shelves, Scribonius pulls out a curious object, a molar
encased in a tiny silver cage. A charm, he explains. For a senator's wife, she believed it kept her other teeth strong. You ask if it worked. He shrugs. She still visits, mostly to complain about figs. Historians still argue whether these kinds of charms had any real ritual purpose or were simply high-end placebo. But there's no denying the emotional weight Romans gave their teeth. Losing one wasn't just painful, it was a sign that something deeper might be wrong, spiritually, physically, or socially. Before you leave, Scribonius insists you try one of his signature rinses. It's quite gentle, he says. You trust him. Mistake. The rinse burns like judgment. Your eyes water, your ears ring, you feel slightly closer to the gods, but not in a comforting way. Scribonius claps you on the back and beams. That's how you know it's working. You thank him, take the small pouch of herbs he offers, and stumble outside into the midday sun, where your tongue slowly returns to your mouth. The river sparkles ahead. Somewhere nearby, someone's playing a reed flute, and you can't tell whether the sound is charming or maddening. As you walk along the Tiber, reflecting on everything you've learned, mouthwashes, spleens, silver-tooth charms, you realize that Roman medicine was part knowledge, part magic, and part extremely confident guessing. And for every odd idea, like treating gum pain with boiled batwing, there's another that's surprisingly modern. Rinsing, flossing, even dental prosthetics. It's a world that mixes science and superstition, vinegar and wisdom with equal enthusiasm. You take a sip from your water pouch and smile. It still tastes faintly of Scribonius's rinse. Somehow, that feels right.
Back in the bustling heart of the city, you find yourself once again weaving through the Roman Forum, past a senator shouting something unintelligible about tariffs, and a group of toga-clad students arguing over Plato while attempting not to trip over their own hems. But your destination this time isn't politics or philosophy. It's the home of a very different sort of professional, the perfumer. Yes, dental care in Rome didn't stop at scraping, rinsing, and mouse teeth remedies. It extended, in true Roman fashion, into the olfactory realm. Because if you were going to chat your way through 10-course feasts and backroom deals, you needed your breath to smell less like fermented garlic and more like confidence. The shop you enter is cool and dim, tucked between a spice merchant and an apothecary. Shelves overflow with tiny glass bottles, each sealed with wax and labeled in the kind of handwriting that suggests either poetry or poison. The perfumer, a woman named Livia with gold-flecked eyes and ink under her nails, greets you with the air of someone who has seen too many senator's halitosis problems to be impressed by yours. Looking for something floral or functional? She asks, without looking up from the mortar she's grinding. You admit it's for your breath. She raises an eyebrow. Ah, so both. She guides you to a shelf labeled Os Munditia, mouth elegance. There, she explains, are the Roman equivalents of mouth fresheners, mixtures of crushed herbs, spices, and oils designed to make your breath tolerable or even pleasant to others. Some are meant to be chewed, others are dabbed on the tongue with tiny brushes made of goose feathers. You marvel at one concoction that includes cinnamon, anise, myrrh, and a touch of cardamom, all wrapped in fig leaf parchment like a tiny, edible perfume sachet.
This isn't just vanity, it's survival. In Rome's hypersocial environment, bad breath could cost you deals, invitations, or even friendships. The elite were known to carry tiny cases filled with breath pastilles, which they discreetly pop during conversations. If your tongue smells like the fish market, Livia quips, don't expect Cicero to lend you his ear. One popular ingredient was mastic gum, resin from a Mediterranean shrub that could be chewed to clean the teeth, freshen the breath, and if you're lucky, not get stuck in your toga. Even Pliny the Elder approved of mastic, although, as Livia notes, Pliny approved of everything except moderation. As you explore the shop, you come across another curiosity: powdered oyster shell mixed with rose oil, allegedly to be dabbed behind the ears for good fortune in love and good breath in whispers. Whether it worked or not, who knows? Historians still debate whether these blends were based on genuine olfactory science or just clever branding. Another scroll in Livia's collection mentions something called succinum tincture, a resin extract used not only as a breath freshener, but also to ward off bad dreams, hiccups, and undesirable suitors. We don't sell that one anymore, she says with a smirk. Too many lawsuits. She even offers you a toothpick carved from aromatic wood imported from India. It smells like sandalwood and mint and fits neatly into a bone case. Perfect for slipping into a tunic or gifting to someone's mouth that needs more than just good wishes.
At some point during your visit, Livia pulls out a faded papyrus and reads from it dramatically. "Let the breath be sweet as the air after rain, lest your lover turn their face away." She smiles. That one's attributed to Ovid, though I suspect he was more concerned with kisses than cavities. You begin to realize just how deep this rabbit hole, or rather, this scented amphora, goes. The Romans weren't simply scrubbing teeth or rinsing for health. They were crafting an entire sensory experience around the mouth. Smell, taste, texture, they all mattered, and they were all monetized. Before you leave, Livia hands you a tiny linen pouch filled with clove buds, sage leaves, and dried orange peel. She says, "Tuck it under your pillow. If it doesn't freshen your breath, it'll at least keep your dreams spicy." You thank her and step back into the light, the air heavy with the mingling scents of garlic stew, donkey sweat, and now a hint of mastic dung from your own breath. It's hard not to feel slightly more elegant, even as a passing street performer burps the alphabet in Latin. As you make your way toward the baths of Caracalla, where more oral surprises await, you reflect on how much breath, fleeting, invisible, yet essential, mattered to ancient Romans. They could conquer continents, build aqueducts, and command legions. But if their breath offended the wrong patrician, it could all come crumbling down. Or at least they'd be left out of the next dinner party. And in Rome, that was almost worse.
The afternoon sun casts long shadows over the towering arches of the baths of Caracalla as you shuffle toward the entrance, your sandals scuffing against warm marble. This isn't just any visit to the Thermae. Today, you're diving into the spa-like side of Roman oral hygiene. Yes, bathing wasn't just about sweat and steam. It was also about minty fresh mouths and elaborate social grooming. You step into the cool gloom of the apoditrium, the changing room, and peel away your dust-covered tunic. Around you, men of every status chatter in clusters. Senators, bakers, philosophers, all united by the equalizing power of nudity and eucalyptus steam. Someone laughs heartily nearby, mouth wide open, and for a flickering moment, you're reminded how much dental status mattered here too. You grab a strigil and oil jar, standard tools of the Roman bathhouse, and head into the tepidarium, the warm room, where marble benches gleam with condensation. The air is thick with the earthy scent of olive oil, damp linen, and the faint trace of dental rinses bubbling in shallow bowls along the walls. Wait, what?
Yes. Over in the corner, a small group of bathers gather around a stand, attended by a slave mixing aromatic rinses, clove water, mint vinegar, even lavender wine swishes. "For the breath," one man says casually,
And for the gossip, you join them, accepting a warm cup of basil-infused water meant to be held in the mouth while sitting in the caldarium, the hottest room. Don't swallow it, the attendant warns. Or do, but don't blame me for what happens later. You pass into the caldarium, the steam room, where the heat hits you like a philosophical argument from Seneca, overwhelming, penetrating, and slightly smug. The air pulses with a warm fog that smells faintly of rosemary and overconfidence. Around you, men sip their dental rinses, chew licorice root, or pass around aromatic twigs they use to clean their teeth. Here, in this humid sanctuary, oral hygiene becomes a ritual. Chewing sticks, precursors to modern toothbrushes, are passed hand to hand. Some are fashioned from bay laurel, others from the twigs of the Salvadora plant, imported at great cost from the East. The ends are chewed until they fray into soft bristles, then used to scrub teeth and gums with surprising efficiency. You try one. Your jaw gets a workout, but the astringent tingle on your gum is oddly satisfying. One elder, his beard soaked with sweat and scented oil, explains that he dips his twig in powdered charcoal to whiten his teeth. He says with a wink, the whiter your smile, the more convincing your lies. Another man insists on using dried Irish root, which he believes connects the teeth directly to divine inspiration. Pliny wrote about it, he adds defensively, or maybe I dreamed it. Same thing, really.
Historians still debate whether these spa-based oral rituals were common among all classes or limited to the wealthy elite who could afford bathhouse access and imported roots. But evidence from graffiti, household finds, and personal letters suggests that even the lower classes mimicked these practices when they could, albeit with simpler tools and fewer aromatic twigs. In the frigidarium, the cold room, your teeth chatter involuntarily, and your breath smells like an herbal garden caught in a snowstorm. It's refreshing, if slightly alarming. Beside you, a retired soldier with only 6 teeth remaining chews a strip of fennel bark and explains that soldiers on campaign often used pine needles for mouth freshening. Keeps the wolves from sniffing you out, he claims. You nod politely, unsure if that's metaphor or trauma. On your way out, you notice a corner stand selling mouth kits, small bundles of twigs, oil vials, powdered pumice, and breath pastilles, all wrapped in cloth and tied with string. It's the Roman version of a dental goodie bag. You buy one, of course, because who could resist a mastic chew stick in mint pebble after a solid steam? As you redress in the apodidarium, you realize that for Romans, the bathhouse was more than hygiene or a social performance. It was a sensory experience. Heat, scent, sound, and touch, all wrapped in rituals that extended even to the teeth. Oral care wasn't an isolated task. It was part of a whole-body philosophy of maintenance, elegance, and public acceptability. And perhaps, you think, as you step into the waning light with a new bounce in your breath, that's what made it work. Not the ingredients or the science, but the ritual, the way it made people feel clean, connected, and just a little bit more dignified. A passing boy selling honey cakes wrinkles his nose and shouts, "You smell like basil and confidence." You grin. He's not wrong.
You're barely 2 streets away from the baths when your nostrils twitch. An unmistakable odor wafts past. Pungent, oddly sweet, unmistakably ammonia. You know that scent now. It's the telltale sign of ancient Roman toothpaste, or more precisely, another encounter with that most unforgettable of ingredients, human urine. But this time it's not in the public lavatories or on a laundry line. No, today you're stepping inside one of Rome's many fulonicae, laundries that doubled as production hubs for a peculiar sort of toothpaste base.
You duck under a low stone arch and into a courtyard filled with massive stone tubs and workers stumping barefoot in yellow-tinged liquid. If you weren't already familiar, you might think they were making wine. You'd be wrong. Deeply, profoundly wrong. A Fulonica is a place of transformation, and not just for togas. It's where garments are softened, bleached, and purified, using one of the most abundant free-flowing resources of the city, urine, or, as the Romans delicately called it, lotium. Collected daily from public urinals and chamber pots, it's poured into vats and mixed with volcanic ash to make a lye-rich solution, perfect for stripping grease, grime, and, yes, dental plaque. You politely edge past a shirtless man with calves of steel as he stomps rhythmically, churning garments in a yellowish froth. The smell is indescribable. "The smell of civilization," he says cheerfully, "and sometimes of mint if we're lucky."
In a side alcove, you meet a woman carefully measuring out powdered pumice, chalk dust, and dried iris root into small ceramic pots. She adds a splash of filtered laudanum and stirs it into a paste. This, she tells you, is one of Rome's most effective tooth-scrubbing agents. "Cuts through plaque like a dagger through butter," she says, handing you a stick with a smear of it on the end. You hesitate. She nods, entirely too encouragingly. To your surprise, and not a little horror, it works. The gritty texture polishes your teeth with astonishing efficiency, and the ammonia somehow neutralizes odor, leaving your mouth feeling shockingly fresh, like a mix of pine cleaner and antique shop. "See," she says, "your breath smells like a tax collector's conscience, spotless." While many Romans preferred herbal rinses and mastic gum, this paste had its own loyal fan base, especially among the working classes and the fastidious rich. According to the woman, who insists on being called Domitilla the dentally daring, aristocratic clients would often send slaves to collect their personalized blend: iris root for whitening, charcoal for polishing, and the piece de resistance, aged urine, prized for its higher ammonia content. Historians still argue whether this mixture was ever truly mainstream, or just one of many fringe hygiene fads. Some say it was common knowledge that urine restored the whiteness of youth. Others believe it was a last resort, an effective but socially awkward trick that one might whisper about, not advertise. One thing's for sure. The Roman poet Catullus once insulted a man by implying his teeth were polished with Spanish urine. So either it was common enough to mock, or rare enough to shame.
Domitilla rolls her eyes. "The Spanish kind is better," she says, sniffing a jar like a wine connoisseur. "Aged longer, transported in amphore. The nose is brighter, more assertive." You don't ask how she knows. At the back of the Fulonica, beside a shelf lined with cork-stoppered jars of murky liquid, hangs a faded wooden sign carved with a toothy grin. Beneath it, painted in flaking red letters, are the words "Sapo dentarius," guaranteed to clean or offend. You suspect it does both quite effectively. On your way out, Domitilla hands you a small ivory box filled with crumbles of dried toothpaste. "Just add water," she chirps, "or don't, for a more authentic feel." You nod, trying not to inhale too deeply. Outside, the air smells faintly of olives and roasted chestnuts, a welcome change. You duck into a shadowy portico and lean against a pillar, pondering the bizarre elegance of it all. This culture that built aqueducts and mosaics also chose, quite knowingly, to scrub their mouths with one of the smelliest substances on earth. And not because they had no alternatives, but because in their eyes, it worked. You run your tongue over your teeth. Smooth. Disturbingly smooth. And you admit it. For all its nose-wrinkling origins, Roman ingenuity continues to surprise you. Here, even the foulest waste becomes a tool for dignity, cleanliness, and surprisingly effective dental care. As a street performer nearby breaks into an off-key rendition of Virgil's Aeneid, you clutch your little ivory box and wonder if the future will look back at your own toothpaste routine with the same mixture of horror and admiration.
Probably yes. You wake the next morning with the faint taste of iris root still clinging to your molars. The little ivory box from Domitilla sits beside your cot, its lid ajar like a winking dare. But there's no time to ponder questionable dental decisions. You've got an appointment with one of Rome's most mysterious hygiene experts, a physician who doubles as a cosmete or beautician to the city's elite. You make your way down a colonnaded street where doves coo from terracotta rooftops and bread merchants call out their wares. Eventually, you find yourself in the atrium of a domus, adorned with delicate mosaics. Venus combing her hair, Narcissus admiring his own dazzling grin. You knock. The door opens to reveal a woman in a sharply pleated stola and an expression that says she has no time for your nonsense. "I'm Flavia," she says briskly. "Sit, mouth open, no sudden movements." You're guided into a room that smells of crushed rose petals and scorched beeswax. On a marble counter rests an assortment of strange items: oyster shells, ash and terracotta bowls, and what appears to be a goblet of goat's milk. Flavia selects a slender bronze pick and begins inspecting your teeth as though preparing to restore a fresco. You flinch. She tuts. "What do you eat? Grilled dormice, honey cakes, boiled turnips?" You mutter something vague about lentils. "Well," she says, "you have the teeth of a poet, soft, underwhelming, and overly sweet."
She reaches for a small jar labeled Pulvis dentifricus, tooth powder. It contains a blend of charcoal, myrrh, and powdered deer antler. She dips a moistened twig into the mixture and hands it to you. "Scrub," she instructs. "Clockwise, we're not animals." As you obediently brush, she explains that Romans often sought the advice of physicians for cosmetic and dental needs alike. The line between beauty and health was hazy at best. White teeth weren't just fashionable, they were associated with divine favor, self-discipline, and personal hygiene. It's said that Augustus himself preferred courtiers with minty breath, though historians still argue whether this was a genuine preference or palace gossip. One of Flavia's favorite clients, she tells you, was a senator's wife who used a blend of oyster shell powder and honey to both clean and coat her teeth in a pearly sheen. "It didn't last," she says. She smiled once, and half the coating ended up in her soup. As you rinse with a sage and vinegar concoction, she pulls out a scroll, an ancient beauty manual, possibly attributed to the infamous Ovid himself. In it are recipes for whitening powders, chalk and crushed pearls, breath fresheners, mint and cumin, and even early braces. That's right, Romans experimented with gold wire to realign crooked teeth. One recipe involves coating the gums with powdered frankincense to calm the nerves of the jaw. You suspect it calmed nothing except maybe the physician's conscience. "You don't need braces," Flavia mutters, squinting at your molars. "But you might want to chew fewer fig cakes. They're glue in disguise."
She sets to work on your gums, massaging them with a balm made from mastic resin, fennel oil, and what she proudly declares to be fermented mare's milk. You flinch again. "Stop being dramatic," she scolds. "This is high society." Historians still debate how widespread these elaborate routines really were. Were they the norm for middle-class Romans, or limited to the elite who could afford their own Flavia? Archaeological digs suggest that even modest homes had dental tools: scrapers, rinsing cups, powder jars, tucked in bathroom corners. Oral care, it seems, was as much about personal pride as it was about status. As your appointment ends, Flavia hands you a polished bone toothpick and a small satchel of crushed mint leaves. "Chew one every hour, and no more crusty bread. You'll ruin everything I've done." Back on the street, you feel oddly regal. Your breath smells like a summer garden. Your teeth feel newly scrubbed, and your tongue has stopped tingling from the vinegar rinse. You pass a mirror vendor and catch your reflection. Is your smile brighter, or just more confident? Perhaps both. In the distance, a group of children shout rhymes about yellow teeth and garlic breath, a common insult among the young. You smile serenely, the bone toothpick tucked behind your ear like a badge of honor. Here in Rome, oral care isn't just maintenance, it's identity. It's artistry. And in the right hands, it's borderline magic.
You're seated now on a shaded bench near the forum, watching two toga-clad men argue over a debt, while a hawker offers honey-drenched walnuts to passersby. After your stint with Flavia and her vinegar-scented salon of beauty, your thoughts drift toward more ordinary Romans, the ones without bone-handled toothpicks or amphorae of mare's milk rinse. How did the average plebeian tend to their teeth? Did they even bother? Turns out, absolutely. With a bit less elegance, perhaps, but just as much dedication. You follow the scent of grilled onions and chickpea cakes down a winding alley, where a cluster of apartment-style insulae, Roman tenements, rises like a crooked pile of bricks. On a second-floor balcony, a grandmother leans over a rail, chewing noisily on a twig. She sees your curious glance and grins, her teeth stained from wine, but surprisingly intact. "This," she says, holding up the twig, "Salvadora persica, chew stick, always works." This plant, native to parts of Africa and the Middle East, was one of many natural toothbrushes used by Romans across the empire. While the elite might favor Egyptian ivory tools or mint-rubbed paste, the working class had their own arsenal of plant-based scrubbing devices: willow twigs for whitening, licorice root to sweeten the breath, and fennel stems for general freshness.
She tosses you a stick and tells you to chew one end until it frays. Then scrub, always downward. You want to chase the food out, not deeper in. You follow her instructions while she lists her other favorites: crushed barley mixed with salt, lemon peel for polishing, and the occasional rinse with goat's whey if the mouth gets cranky. You suspect cranky refers to anything from sore gums to a brewing infection. She nods toward a worn ceramic cup on her window ledge, filled with cloudy liquid. Old vinegar and rose petals. I gargle it when my mouth smells like wet sandals. Historians still argue whether plebeians had consistent oral hygiene routines or merely improvised with whatever they had on hand. Excavated tenement homes in Pompeii and Herculaneum have turned up surprising finds. Plaque scrapers, rinsing bowls, and herbal packets not unlike modern breath mints. Even graffiti boasts of kisses sweeter than myrtle, teeth whiter than marble. Apparently, dental bragging rights were alive and well. You leave the grandmother with a grateful nod and make your way through a bustling open-air market. Vendors shout over each other, selling garum sauce, baked eels, and, of all things, cured mouse tails. You politely decline. At a small spice stall, you spot jars labeled juniper, asafoides, and clove. The merchant, a cheerful man missing 2 front teeth, offers you a tiny cone of dried resin. "Frankincense," he says proudly. "Chew it for breath like a god's."
You pop it in your mouth and wince at the bitterness, but then, almost magically, it softens and fills your palate with a piney freshness. It stings a little at first, he chuckles. That's how you know it's working. Turns out, chewing frankincense or myrrh wasn't just a religious offering. It was daily dental care for many Romans. The resins had antibacterial properties and left behind a pleasant scent. Some physicians even prescribed it for gum inflammation or sore throats. As you wander on, resin dissolving in your cheek, you notice something else. Toothpicks, lots of them. Men and women alike carry slivers of bronze or bone tucked into belts or hair. After meals, out they come. No shame, no subtlety. In fact, the poet Martial once wrote verses mocking people who didn't clean their teeth in public. You eat a cow and pick your teeth with a straw. Try wood next time. By now, you're fully equipped. Your twig toothbrush, a resin chew, and the growing suspicion that ancient Rome had stronger dental habits than many modern citizens. Granted, they lacked fluoride, but they more than made up for it in creativity and consistency. And yet you can't help but notice the darker side of this dedication. Outside a small apothecary, you spot a woman moaning softly, holding her jaw with trembling fingers. A boy sits beside her, dipping a cloth in cold wine and pressing it to her cheek. The apothecary leans over a brazier, heating what looks suspiciously like a metal hook. Tooth pain, you realize, was no stranger to the ancient world, and when herbs failed, there was always the fallback: extraction. No anesthetic, no polite conversation, just courage, a cloth to bite, and hopefully a strong arm. The apothecary catches your eye. "You need a tooth out?" he asks. You shake your head vigorously. He shrugs. "They always say that, until it's too late." As you walk away, you reflect on the delicate balance of ancient Roman dental care. Thoughtful hygiene on one hand, sheer brutality on the other. But at least now, you're prepared. You've got your resin, your rinse, your twig. And, thanks to Flavia, probably the freshest breath in this entire district. You're back in the bustling heart of Rome now, drifting through a crowd that parts like lazy waves around you. Street performers juggle amphora lids while shouting fishmongers try to outbellow one another. But above the noise, your ears catch something unusual. A sharp clack of metal, followed by a strange, rhythmic scraping sound. Curious, you follow the noise down a narrow corridor and emerge in front of what seems like a public bath. But instead of the usual chorus of splashes and gossip, you find a row of men standing in line for the barber. Now, this isn't the kind of barber you're used to. This is a tonsure. And in Rome, he's not just a hair guy. He's a full-on grooming guru. You take a seat on a low marble bench and watch as the man in front of you gets lathered up with a mixture of goat fat and ashes. The tonsure wields a razor that looks more like a small scythe, and you're not entirely sure if it's meant for shaving faces or harvesting barley. The man being shaved doesn't flinch. In fact, he looks half asleep. Turns out, a visit to the tonsure isn't just about trimming your beard. It's a full social ritual. You're surrounded by men chatting about politics, comparing gladiator bets, or just cracking jokes about their mother-in-law's lentil stew. It's like a barber shop and a town hall rolled into one. You're offered a rough towel and a bit of perfumed oil as a welcoming gesture. "First time?" the guy next to you asks, smirking. You nod, and he pats your shoulder. "Don't worry. If he nicks you, it's only superficial." Superficial, yes, but still alarming. You watch as the tonsor switches tools and begins to pluck stray hairs from another client's armpit with a pair of bronze tweezers. Personal space, apparently, was not a major concern. And here's the kicker. Barbers in ancient Rome were often regarded as something between a necessary nuisance and a community therapist. You came here not just to clean up, but to talk it out. The tonsor knew everyone's secrets. Who was cheating on whom? Who owed whom money? Who'd lost big at dice the night before? Your modern-day therapist would be horrified and maybe slightly jealous. Historians still argue whether the barbershop functioned more as a grooming station or a form of early community surveillance. Either way, you learn fast that the tonsor sees all, hears all, and, based on the side-eye he's giving that centurion in the corner, remembers everything. You finally work up the courage to sit down. The tonsor lathers your cheeks with a paste that smells faintly of garlic and lavender. Not exactly spa-like, but oddly comforting. He picks up a strigil, a curved scraping tool more often used in the bathhouse, and runs it gently across your skin. You try not to flinch. "Good pores," he mutters. "Bit dry. You need more olive oil." You thank him politely, though you're unsure if that was a compliment or a diagnosis. Midway through your shave, a skinny youth bursts through the door, waving a scrap of parchment. "New epigrams from Marshall!" he shouts. Instantly, the room quiets. The boy reads aloud a series of sarcastic verses, each poking fun at Roman hygiene rituals. Bad breath, excessive cologne, men who pluck too much.
You chuckle along with the others, imagining a city where everyone obsesses over appearance but pretends not to care. Sound familiar? Once the tonsor finishes with you, only one tiny nick, and you barely noticed, you're dabbed with rose water and offered a sprig of mint to chew on. You take it, pleased with how clean you feel and slightly smug that you survived with all your ears intact. As you leave the barber shop, you spot a man on the steps applying kohl to his eyes with the practiced precision of a seasoned makeup artist. He offers you a wink. Good for keeping the sun out and the ladies in. Yes, makeup in ancient Rome wasn't just for women. Men used powders, tints, and even light rouges to emphasize their features, though, of course, just the right amount lest one be mocked for vanity. You pass a young man nervously inspecting his chin in a polished silver mirror. He dabs at a blemish with what appears to be mashed fig. Homemade concealer, Roman edition. And so your stroll through Roman grooming continues one detail at a time. From the tonsor gory razors to cheeky poetry readings, from mint-scented mouths to fig-smeared cheeks, you're beginning to understand that hygiene here is more than a routine. It's a performance, a dance, a game of appearances. Everyone's playing, you're just now learning the steps.
Freshly shaved and slightly scented, you wander back into the warm Roman air, where the scent of pine resin mingles with roasting chickpeas and something vaguely medicinal. You follow your nose toward the source, a cramped stall tucked between a sandalmaker's workshop and a fishmonger with questionable refrigeration. At first glance, it looks like an apothecary, but as you get closer, the jars come into focus. Alabaster, clay, and thick green glass, all neatly labeled in Latin. You've stumbled into the realm of Roman cosmetics. "Face powder?" the stallholder asks without looking up. "Or are you more of a crocodile dung kind of guy?" You blink. Surely you misheard. Nope. Turns out crocodile dung was indeed a favored base for Roman beauty masks, mixed with honey, sour milk, or crushed pearls.
It was applied at night and scraped off in the morning with, yes, a strigil, that ever-present curved blade. Supposedly, it softened the skin and kept wrinkles at bay. You can't help but wonder what else it kept away. Probably most romantic partners. But it wasn't all animal waste. Some elite Roman women, and men too, would use finely ground lead to whiten their skin, chasing that fashionable ethereal pallor. Never mind that it slowly poisoned them. Health was negotiable. Aesthetics were not.
You pick up a jar of what looks like a dark salve. The vendor catches your interest and opens it, revealing a sticky black paste that smells vaguely of pine and vinegar. "This one's for under the eyes," she says. "Keeps away puffiness and gossip." The Romans, you learn, took their appearance seriously. Being well-groomed was a social weapon. You couldn't climb the ranks of Roman society with cracked heels and bad breath. Every detail mattered. Nails were polished with pumice, teeth brightened with ground bones or powdered charcoal, and eyebrows darkened with soot or crushed ant eggs. Yes, ant eggs. You shudder a little and place the jar back on the shelf. Historians still argue whether these concoctions were more about beauty, status, or ritual purification. Some claim it was a spiritual act, a way to show you cared for the body the gods gave you. Others say it was just peer pressure wrapped in a fig leaf of philosophy. A young patrician woman approaches the stall beside you. She's wearing a sheer, saffron-dyed tunic and holding a lapdog with braids in its fur. Without hesitation, she demands rose petal powder and a vial of imported Indian oil, likely spikenard, known for its rich scent and absurd price tag. Her accent is polished, her nails are obsidian black, and her posture practically screams, "I have never touched a chamber pot in my life." The vendor bows slightly and presents her with the goods, which she accepts with a nonchalant nod before gliding away. You, meanwhile, are still trying to figure out whether eyeliner made from soot and pig fat is worth the risk of conjunctivitis. There's an entire section of the stall dedicated to perfumes. Some are sharp and vinegary, meant to cover body odors. Others are rich with myrrh, saffron, or cinnamon. You unstopper one vial and get hit with a scent so strong it could double as an insect repellent. Another smells like warm bread and citrus, a Roman take on cologne, perhaps? Perfumes, you learn, were layered. A base scent for the skin, another for the hair, yet another for clothes, which were often hung in fragrant smoke before being worn. The goal wasn't subtlety, it was saturation. If you didn't leave a scent trail down the Via Appia, were you even trying? There's a scroll hanging near the stall listing popular recipes. One includes ingredients like honey, barley water, ground deer antler, and something ominously labeled goat secretions. Another mask boasts a blend of crushed snails and wine, because nothing says radiant complexion like mollusk juice and merlot. A Roman man walks by wearing what appears to be a powdered wig made of... Wait, is that actual hair? Yes! Human hair pieces were imported from conquered lands, especially from Gaul and Germania, and then dyed to suit Roman tastes. Blondes were especially desirable. So, if you ever envied a senator's golden curls, chances are they came from someone else's head, possibly by force. You imagine modern beauty influencers trying to make this work. Hey guys, today I'm reviewing the new crocodile dung mask, and wow, it really tightens the pores. Despite the absurdity, there's something endearing about it all. The effort, the rituals, the quiet declaration that yes, you care about how you present yourself, even if it means applying snail slime before bed or drawing fake veins onto your temples for that delicately anemic look. You leave the stall with a small jar of what the vendor assures you is a universal solve, somewhere between lip balm, wrinkle cream, and prayer. It smells faintly of cinnamon and smoke. As you continue your stroll, you pass others in various states of beauty maintenance. A woman applying red ochre to her lips with a feather, a young man using a mirror shard to perfect his eyeliner, and a child carefully dabbing perfume onto her mother's wrists. The sun begins to lower, and golden light hits the marble walls just right. The entire street seems to glow, and so do its people, each gleaming, scented, powdered, and, in their own way, proudly human. You smile. Perhaps you'll try that dung mask after all. But maybe not tonight.
You meander away from the perfumed chaos of the cosmetic stall and into the more subdued rhythm of a Roman residential street. Gone are the clamor of vendors and the perfumed punch of ant-egg eyeliner. Here, in the quieter parts of the city, you enter the realm of Roman domesticity. The domus, or house, lies ahead, its doorway half hidden behind a hanging curtain dyed with indigo. You step inside. Immediately, the sounds of the city fade. The thick walls are designed to muffle noise and trap cool air. The atrium greets you, an open central courtyard with a sunlit hole in the roof called the compluvium. Rainwater would fall through it into the impluvium, a shallow basin on the floor that collects water like a very stylish puddle. It's beautiful in a minimalist sort of way, more Hygieia meets marble temple than cluttered grandma house. The walls are painted in vivid frescoes, scenes of mythology, banquets, animals that don't quite obey the laws of physics. You walk past a rather enthusiastic-looking dolphin leaping through a fire. Someone had a creative day with the paintbrush. The owner of this home, you're told, is a wealthy freedman. Not born noble, but made rich through trade. Olive oil, to be precise. And, like many of Rome's newly rich, he's done his best to dress his home in the trappings of old money. Marble busts, mosaic floors, and plenty of wine-stained reclining couches. You pass a triclinium, the formal dining room, where 3 couches are arranged around a low table. This is where guests would lounge on their sides while eating. Yes, side lounging. It's elegant, but also just a tad uncomfortable. And yes, indigestion was a recurring Roman theme.
Historians still debate whether this lounging habit was more about mimicking Greek nobility or just an elaborate excuse to stretch while eating figs. Either way, it looks cool. Slightly pretentious, but cool. From the atrium, you move through a series of progressively more private rooms. Cubicula, or bedrooms, flank the hallway. Small, windowless, and furnished with little more than a low bed and a chest. Spartan by modern standards, but comfortable enough, especially if you've just finished a banquet and can't see straight. You step into the culina, the kitchen, and get hit with a wave of heat and smoke. It's tiny, almost claustrophobic, and absolutely filled with amphorae, those tall clay jars that look like props but were basically the Tupperware of the ancient world. There's no chimney, so the smoke just rises and lingers in the rafters like a sulking teenager. A cook, shirtless, apron-clad, and expertly unimpressed, stirs a pot over an open flame. The smell is complex, a mix of fish sauce, lentils, and toasted cumin. Garum, the infamous Roman condiment made from fermented fish guts, features prominently. You hold back a gag and offer a polite nod. On a side table, you spot ingredients for dinner. Olives, dates, pine nuts, dormice. Yes, dormice. The Romans bred them, fattened them, and served them stuffed with herbs and nuts like little edible pillows. You admire the presentation, if not the ethics.
Just outside, the peristyle garden offers a breath of fresh air. Flowers bloom in neat beds, fountains trickle gently, and songbirds flit among citrus trees. A servant rakes sand into pleasing patterns, a Zen garden before it was cool. It's peaceful here, elegant in a way that even the gaudiest fresco can't compete with. And it's not just aesthetics. The garden was a multifunctional space, a place to relax, to entertain, and to show off. You notice tiny marble statues peeking out from behind topiary, Venus, Apollo, and one very mischievous-looking satyr. They add whimsy, and possibly a hint of scandal, depending on how anatomically accurate the sculptor decided to be.
Inside again, you explore the lararium, the family shrine. It's tucked into a niche and decorated with tiny figurines, lares and penates, household gods meant to protect the home and its hearth. A small dish holds offerings, bread, a coin, perhaps a few dried figs. Religion here is deeply personal, almost cozy. It lives in the corners of the house, in the smoke of incense, and the whisper of daily prayers. And then, like a sharp step in soft sandals, you stumble upon the latrine. Roman homes, at least the wealthier ones, had indoor toilets, a bench with a hole, below a small pit. Beside it, a sponge on a stick. Shared. Yes, shared. You don't want to dwell on it, but somehow you can't stop imagining a family mealtime conversation derailed by sponge disputes. To cleanse the air, perfumed oils or petals were often scattered nearby. You suppose it helped? Maybe. Still, the cleverness of Roman plumbing can't be denied. Aqueducts brought in fresh water, and clever drainage systems carried waste away. Not perfect, but far better than many societies centuries later. You pause in the corridor and glance back toward the front door. The layout of the Roman domos suddenly makes sense. Public life up front, private life hidden deeper in. Architecture as a social filter. If you're a casual acquaintance, you get the atrium. If you're a close friend, or at least bring good wine, you might be invited into the triclinium or the peristyle. It's all very calculated, but it works. The house tells a story, one of taste, ambition, family, and the enduring Roman obsession with appearances. You sit for a moment on a marble bench by the fountain. The water murmurs, a breeze rustles the leaves, and for a brief moment, you forget about the shared sponge.
You rise slowly from the marble bench, letting the faint scent of rosemary and citrus cling to your tunic. The afternoon sun filters softly through the lattice of vine-draped pergolas in the peristyle garden, but the tranquility fades as a new curiosity pulls you down a shaded alley behind the domus toward the insulae. If the domus is the suburban mansion of Roman life, the insulae are its chaotic, overstuffed apartment buildings. And you're about to climb 4 flights of crumbling stairs to see just how the other 90% lived. Your sandals slap the stone steps, worn concave by years of hurried feet. The stairwell is dim and smells like boiled cabbage, smoke, and something vaguely furry. The walls are cracked, painted once but long since faded to the color of old porridge. You reach a landing, and a young woman nods politely as she squeezes past with a basket of laundry. Inside the room beyond, calling it an apartment feels ambitious. Her family of 5 lives in a single space about the size of a modern parking spot. There's a mat for sleeping, a brazier for cooking, and shelves jammed with every possession they owned. No toilet, no running water, and definitely no frescoes of enthusiastic dolphins. Yet this is normal. Most Romans live like this. In fact, insulae account for the majority of city housing. Some buildings rise 6, even 7 stories high, though upper floors are cheaper,
and more dangerous. Roof collapses and fires were alarmingly common. Historians still argue whether Roman landlords are cruel, negligent, or simply responding to the harsh math of an overcrowded city.
And yet, despite the danger and discomfort, these insulae are lively places. You hear music drifting from one room, a reed flute accompanied by laughter. Somewhere, a baby wails. A grandmother shouts for quiet. A cat darts across the hallway, its tail brushing your leg like a living question mark. You step into a communal corridor and peer into a shared kitchen space. The wall is blackened with soot, and a few clay pots simmer over a fire fed with olive pits and sticks. The cook, an older man missing several teeth, grins at you and points to the pot. Lentil stew, with maybe a hint of onion. You nod appreciatively, though your stomach quietly prays for garlic bread. Back in the corridor, clotheslines crisscross above your head like laundry-flavored spider webs. Tunics, baby wrappings, and one extremely pink toga flutter in the breeze. The smells here shift with every step. Fresh bread, drying fish, sweat, and somewhere, just a whisper of sandalwood. You duck under a beam and peek through a half-open door. Inside, a small family gathers around a low table. They're playing a game, tabula, a sort of ancient backgammon. The children argue over rules, the parents sip watered wine, and the grandmother hums a lullaby older than the Republic. Here, history doesn't feel like something you read in a marble library. It smells like last week's stew and sounds like someone's uncle tripping over a chicken. It's real, messy, wonderfully, hopelessly human. Down the stairs again, you pass a shop on the ground floor. Many insulae had businesses below and living quarters stacked above. This one sells sandals. The cobbler, a wiry man with hands like old bark, looks up from his work and asks if you want calfskin or pig hide. You decline politely, admiring his tools, simple, effective, and covered in decades of use. Behind him, his assistant steers a vat of something pungent. You catch a whiff and recoil. Yep, urine. Collected daily from public jars and used to soften leather. It's all coming full circle.
A Roman street kid, maybe 9 or 10, runs past carrying a bundle of kindling and yelling something about a stolen fig. You step aside just in time to avoid a wheelbarrow laden with bricks. A woman selling boiled eggs calls out prices in sing-song Latin, while a dog sleeps defiantly in the middle of it all. You begin to notice how layered Roman life is. Not just in terms of class or housing, but literally layered. Shop beneath bedroom, bakery beside temple, sewer beneath sidewalk. Everything is stacked, squeezed, and somehow functional. As you walk further, you pass a small fountain. Several residents are gathered, jostling politely with amphorae in hand. This is one of hundreds of public fountains across Rome, fed by the aqueducts that make city life possible. The water gurgles steadily, cool and clear. You take a sip from a ladle left nearby. It tastes like limestone and civilization. A local woman tells you the water comes from Aqua Machia, one of the best aqueducts famous for its crisp flow. You nod sagely, as though this is something you've always known. Yet, despite Rome's engineering brilliance, not all is perfect. The sewage system, impressive though it is, doesn't reach every neighborhood. Some areas, especially poorer ones, still rely on chamber pots emptied into the street, preferably from a low height. You glance up at the insulae and make a mental note not to linger beneath balconies. Your journey through the insula leaves you thoughtful. The grandeur of Roman marble palaces may dazzle, but here, in the cramped, smoky, vital space of the insula, you feel something closer to truth. Rome was not just emperors and senators. It was seamstresses, scribes,
kids with fig-sticky hands, and exhausted parents singing lullabies to the sound of street vendors and the drip of the public fountain. You take a deep breath. The air is still smoky, still a little fishy, but it's honest.
The sun begins to dip low, casting long shadows over the cobbled alleyways as you meander out of the Insulae district. Your feet ache in that oddly satisfying way that only a day's worth of nosiness can provide. You glance over your shoulder at the towering stack of homes, feeling oddly sentimental about the smoky stairwells and pink togas. But now your stomach grumbles, and where better to sample the democratic delights of Roman cuisine than at a thermopolium, the ancient Roman equivalent of a fast food joint. You follow your nose, which picks up on the unmistakable smell of hot oil, herbs, and ambition. The thermopolium stall is simple, a stone counter embedded with circular terracotta jars sunk into its surface. Each jar, called a dolia, contains some kind of simmering stew or wine, or both, depending on your tolerance for stomach roulette. The man behind the counter has a towel over one shoulder, a ladle in one hand, and a grin so practiced it's basically a business license. "Hot chickpeas," he says, gesturing to a steaming dolium. "Also, fried dormice, very fresh, possibly still dreaming." You opt for the chickpeas, garnished with herbs and a splash of fish sauce. The flavor is surprisingly good. Warm, savory, just enough garlic to ward off both bad breath and modesty. You balance the bowl in your hand and find a seat on a nearby ledge, watching the street life unfold around you. Thermopolia are everywhere in Rome, especially in poorer neighborhoods where people often don't have kitchens at home. Archaeologists have found dozens of these setups in places like Pompeii, some with colorful frescoes advertising their specialties. One famous example features a rooster, a wine jug, and a pair of hilariously exaggerated sausages. Subtle? Nope. Effective? Undoubtedly. As you sit, you notice the diversity of the customers. A tired builder with dust still in his beard leans on the counter. A pair of laundry women giggle over cups of watered wine. A teenager with sharp elbows and big dreams is shoveling stew into his mouth like time's running out. Everyone, for a moment, equal in their hunger. And it's not just Thermopolia. Rome is a snacker's paradise. Street vendors sell honeyed nuts, cheese-stuffed buns, and the occasional questionable oyster. Hearts hawk hot mulled wine and barley porridge. And every now and then you pass a bakery with its round, marked loaves cooling on wooden boards. The Roman version of fast food is both familiar and strange. There's no ketchup, no fries, but there is an almost aggressive use of fermented fish sauce, garum, which somehow ends up in everything: meats, veggies, even desserts. Historians still argue whether garum was universally adored or just tolerated, like a loud neighbor you've given up trying to evict. You finish your chickpeas and hand the bowl back, thanking the vendor. He shrugs, as if to say, "It's only food. Come back when you want poetry." You smile and wipe your hands on your tunic, which is now more condiment than fabric. Feeling emboldened, you wander into a nearby market. It's not one of the grand forums, but a neighborhood gathering of stalls and woven canopies. This is where Rome really breathes, between the olive barrels and the fig sellers, the spice merchants and the eel wranglers. A woman with nimble fingers is stuffing vine leaves with a mixture of spelt, nuts, and raisins. You ask about her recipe, and she explains it's from her grandmother, who claimed it was good enough to win a senator's heart, or at least distract him from his indigestion.
Nearby, a spice vendor lets you sniff a handful of cumin and coriander. The aromas are heady, earthy, and unexpectedly modern. You spot saffron, fennel, and dried mint, all traded from across the empire. Trade routes brought the entire Roman palate to its doorstep. Dates from Judea, cinnamon from India, black pepper from somewhere that's definitely not Italy. As the market winds down, you notice a boy walking a pig on a leash. No one seems surprised. You, on the other hand, do a double take. He winks, as if to say, "You've never taken your pork out for a stroll?" It's easy to forget, amid the grandeur, that Rome's real charm is in these small, chaotic corners. The tastes, the smells, the weird moments that feel like they belong in a sitcom. Eventually, you spot a public bench and sink down onto it, full and content. The sun's glow has turned honey golden, and the city seems to exhale with you. Someone nearby is roasting chestnuts over a brazier. A pair of street performers mime a gladiator duel using loaves of stale bread as swords. Rome, for all its pomp, is also just cozy. Even its food has a sleepy charm, designed to fill the belly and quiet the mind. You remember the insula kitchens, the shared stew, the soot-blackened walls and laughter over lentils. Everything circles back, like the scent of garlic in your tunic, or the fact that almost everything you've eaten today was in some form flavored with fish. Rome may be ancient, but its rhythms are oddly familiar. You could close your eyes now and still hear the hiss of oil in a clay pan, the distant bark of the vendor yelling, "Olives! 2 for 1!" Unless you're my cousin. And with that thought, your stomach softly full, and your sandals just beginning to unstrap themselves from sheer exhaustion, you lean back, half listening to the hum of twilight commerce. It's been a good day to eat like a Roman.
The last light slips below the horizon as you rise from the bench, stretching limbs that feel just a bit doughy from a day of wandering and snacking. Rome's pace is slowing now. Fewer carts clatter down the streets, fewer shouts from shop fronts. But the city doesn't sleep, not really. It shifts gears. You head uphill, away from the bustle of the marketplace and into a quieter district. The air is cooler here, scented with wood smoke and something sweet, maybe pine resin or the fading echo of roasted chestnuts. You pass a small public fountain where 2 boys are splashing each other with practiced mischief, and then a group of older women sitting on steps, hands busy with thread and gossip. And that's when you spot it. A modest but clearly marked building with a torch lit outside and a discreet sign that hints at its purpose. A Roman bathhouse. Your tired body practically makes the decision for you. You push through the entrance curtain and step inside. The interior is warm and dim, with the steady hiss of steam in the air. Lanterns cast flickering shadows on mosaic-tiled floors. There's a low murmur of voices, men and women on separate schedules, though you're lucky enough to arrive during mixed hours. You pay a small entrance fee and are handed a bit of oil and a strigil, a curved bronze scraper that's somehow both hygienic and threatening. First up, the appetitorium, or changing room. It's lined with stone benches and cubbies. You strip down like a seasoned local, though you keep your tunic folded neatly, because, even in the past, laundry's nobody's favorite. A friendly attendant eyes your sandals like he's seen worse. Then it's into the tepidarium, the warm room. Your skin instantly thanks you. The air is thick with heat, scented faintly with herbs and sweat. You sit on a bench that's just shy of being too hot and let the warmth loosen your joints. Other bathers are reclining, chatting lazily about politics, theater, and which senator's toupee keeps falling off mid-debate. One man offers you a date stuffed with pine nuts. Good for the digestion, he says, or the soul, one of the two. Then comes the caldarium, the hot room. It's steamy, almost sauna-like.
You pour water over your head, and it feels like 1,000 tiny gods are massaging your scalp. A bathhouse worker offers to scrape your back with a strigil, and you accept, despite the process being somewhere between refreshing and mildly abrasive. Still, after a layer of Roman grime and snack oil is removed, you emerge redder but better. Historians still argue whether bathhouses were primarily for hygiene or for networking. But in truth, they served both. Here, you could catch up on gossip, plan a business deal, or eavesdrop on the latest rumors about a general's failed affair with a temple priestess. It was all on the table. Often, literally, if you wandered into the massage rooms or snack areas. You even hear snippets of philosophy. One older man is arguing that life is like a sponge. Sometimes useful, sometimes soggy, always full of holes. Finally, you make your way to the frigidarium, the cold room. You brace yourself and dunk into the plunge pool. It steals your breath, resets your pulse, and surprisingly doesn't make you regret anything. You emerge tingling, like your body just got rebooted by a particularly judgy deity.
After drying off, you lounge again in the tepidarium, sipping a cup of spiced wine offered by a generous stranger. The lanterns flicker lower now, and voices soften. You spot someone playing a quiet tune on a reed flute. You close your eyes for a moment, drifting in and out of thoughts about olive oil, street theater, and whether anyone ever actually liked being scraped by bronze. And it's here, in this half-drowsy warmth, that you begin to appreciate how integrated these bathhouses were into daily Roman life. For many, it wasn't a luxury, it was routine. Some went every day, others just when the grime built up, or the news was too juicy to miss. The baths were surprisingly egalitarian, too. While there were class distinctions in some fancier establishments, most Roman bathhouses welcomed a mix of society: traders, scholars, former slaves, musicians, even the occasional senator trying to pass as just a regular guy. It was part of what kept the city ticking, steaming, and softly murmuring. You're reminded of earlier today, the Insula tenant scraping together a meal, the Thermopolium owner with his proud chickpeas, the grandmother selling vine-wrapped dreams in the marketplace. Rome is vast, sure, but it's also deeply, disarmingly human. Eventually, your fingers prune and your eyelids droop. You gather your things, nod to the attendant, who may or may not have napped through your entire visit, and step back out into the evening. The streets are quieter now. Torches flicker in brackets along the walls. You pass a small procession of neighbors carrying musical instruments, heading to a dinner party, or maybe just looking for someone to serenade under a balcony. Somewhere, a cat darts across the road, probably chasing a rat that's definitely fatter than it should be. Rome is still awake, but you? You're floating, like a dumpling in warm broth. And the best part? Tomorrow you can do it all again. If your sandals forgive you.
You step lightly through the now sleepy streets, your limbs pleasantly heavy from the bath. The stones are cool beneath your soles, and the echo of your steps accompanies you like a soft tambourine. Most of the crowds have faded into homes and taverns, though you still hear laughter floating from upper windows, and the occasional clink of amphora being stacked in some distant storage room. Rome, after dark, feels like a city exhaling. Drawn by a familiar scent, you veer into a narrow side street and find yourself at a late-night taberna vinaria, a humble wine bar that welcomes the dusty and the curious. It's not fancy, but the lanterns are cozy, the bench seats wide enough to lounge on, and someone has spilled a bowl of olives that a local dog is contentedly cleaning up. You find a spot and settle in, ordering a small cup of watered wine and a plate of honeyed dates.
The innkeeper, a woman with laugh lines deeper than Hadrian's aqueducts, nods you approvingly. She says, "You look like you've just been scrubbed by Mercury himself," pouring generously. The patrons here are a mixed bunch. Off-duty artisans, young scribes, and even a retired soldier telling exaggerated tales about elephants in Britannia. Whether they're true or not doesn't seem to matter. Everyone nods along, half listening, half nibbling. And then someone begins to play music. A kithara, plucked gently, fills the room with a lullaby of ancient chords. It's not performance, it's participation. A nearby man taps a small drum softly with his fingertips. Someone hums along. You too sway a little with the rhythm, wine warming your throat.
The conversation floats from farming taxes to public games. Someone shares a rumor that Emperor Hadrian himself is planning to outlaw one particularly outrageous hair dye. A younger woman wonders aloud if there will ever be a time when people don't throw fish guts in the street. The general consensus is unlikely. This is the heart of Rome, not found in marble or conquest. It's found in moments like this, in cracked cups passed between strangers, in the jokes that make no sense but still land, in the shared humanity over a bowl of garum-slathered lentils. A sleepy philosopher in the corner starts talking about dreams. What if, he slurs gently, what if the gods are just old memories of really convincing weather? You sip your wine, unable to disagree. Historians still argue whether Roman taverns were havens of culture or dens of vice. Probably both, but they were also quite clearly a form of social glue. They allowed strangers to bond over shared bread and grumbles, and importantly, they gave the average Roman who didn't have a villa or a private library a place to relax, to speak freely, and to pretend that for one evening they were emperors of their own little table. And you're starting to feel like royalty. The moonlight filters through the tavern doorway as a couple walks in arm in arm, giggling over something whispered. You catch snippets, something about a baker, a missing sandal, and a love letter that accidentally got baked into a pie. The stuff of future myths, or at least neighborhood gossip.
Outside, the breeze carries scents from the river. The soft tang of water, the musk of distant laundry drying, the faintest whiff of fish and figs. Somewhere, a street performer plucks out a tune on panpipes, luring a dog and two curious children down an alley. You lean back and close your eyes. It's the kind of tired that feels earned. Eventually, the innkeeper shuffles by with a blanket and drapes it over your shoulders. "Stay as long as you like," she says. "We've had worse sleepers on that bench." You smile. You're not quite ready for sleep yet, not while Rome hums so quietly and kindly around you. But your body is beginning to soften. Your thoughts blur, looping lazily like a chariot doing laps in syrup. And so you linger. You sip the last of the wine, its sweetness lingering on your tongue like the end of a well-told story. You think about earlier, the bustling streets, the surprising comfort of a wool tunic, the way Roman teeth glinted oddly white from their urea cleaning rituals. You will never quite look at your toothbrush the same way again. This is how it always happens here. The grandeur draws you in, but it's the mundane that keeps you. The warmth of a shared meal, the quiet pride of a potter, the bad jokes and better bread. Soon you'll leave this tavern. You'll wander back through the city, past sleeping markets, drowsy fountains, and cats curled on temple steps. You'll find a quiet place to rest, perhaps on the roof of a friend's insula or beneath the painted awning of an empty shopfront. But for now, the night is yours. You wake slowly to the gentle creak of early morning life. A broom swishes softly nearby. An old woman sweeping olive pits and breadcrumbs from the tabernet floor. You're still wrapped in the blanket she draped over you, and for a few moments you don't move. The stone bench beneath you has molded itself perfectly to your back, or perhaps you've just grown used to its welcome firmness. Outside, Rome is stirring. Not loudly, no clanging triumphal horns or marching centurions yet, but in that sleepy way of markets yawning open, oxen huffing into their yokes, and pigeons fluttering down to see what breakfast crumbs they can snag before the children chase them off. You step into the dawn with the air still cool on your face. Your limbs stretch with satisfaction, joints clicking softly like puzzle pieces settling into place. The street is damp from overnight washing, and you step side a puzzle that contains both a laurel leaf and something suspiciously sticky. You're heading to meet someone today, a man who's neither a senator nor a merchant, but wields a surprising amount of influence nonetheless. He's Rome's most popular barber. Yes, barbers in ancient Rome were more than just snippers of split ends. They were community hubs, gossip channels, amateur therapists, and occasional bloodletters. If you wanted a clean shave and a rundown of every scandal from the Palatine to the Subura, this was the place you went. You enter his humble shop, tucked between a shoe repair stall and a shrine to Fortuna. The space smells of oils, beeswax, and something faintly metallic. A few stools line the wall, each filled with a man in various stages of transformation, some with half-shaved beards, others mid-gossip. Your turn comes, and you settle into the chair. He greets you with a nod and a sly grin. You've got the look of someone who fell asleep in their toga. You explain you spent the night in a tavern. He shrugs. So did half of Rome. He begins his work with a bronze razor that glints ominously in the early light. A bit of olive oil is massaged into your cheeks, and he hums a tune you don't recognize, possibly something from the latest pantomime show at the Forum. As he works, he talks. Barbers, it turns out, know everything. Who's embezzling from the grain dole, which senator's wife is sneaking off with her bodyguard, which local baker might be switching his flour supplier, a scandal of imaginable magnitude. You learn that the emperor's cousin is investing in a new kind of amphora designed specifically for garlic storage, and that someone's been secretly burying wine jugs under the Forum to keep them cool. Historians still argue, the barber murmurs, whether that counts as innovation or a fire hazard. He also warns you about a rising trend, young Romans trying to bleach their hair, using fermented pigeon droppings. Don't do it, he whispers. It never ends well. You promise him you won't. As he trims your beard, he mentions a superstition gaining traction, that shaving on the Ides of any month guarantees misfortune. Naturally, today is the Ides. He pauses mid-stroke. Do you want to reschedule?
You look at your reflection in the polished copper mirror. Half your face is shaved. You smile. No, go ahead. He chuckles and finishes the job with flair, dabbing a perfumed cloth across your skin. You feel like a brand new citizen, someone who could convincingly recite Cicero and then challenge a gladiator to chess. Barber shops in Rome weren't just for the elite either. Everyone came. Slaves, freedmen, patricians, poets, even emperors occasionally popped in for a touch-up, though they typically sent their own staff. Still, to sit in a Roman barber shop was to be part of something timeless, a collective hum of voices trading news, nonsense, and neck massages. You pay with a small coin and an even smaller joke, something about Cicero's hairline, and the barber nods in approval.
Come back in 8 days, unless you grow faster than a senator's ego.
Back outside, the sun is cresting the rooftops, splashing gold across the baked walls and making the dust look like powdered amber. You run a hand along your jaw, smooth, scented, and slightly stung. You feel oddly regal. You meander toward the forum, passing vendors setting up stalls. One man is balancing a tower of turnips. Another's trying to explain to a confused goat that the produce isn't for eating yet. A young girl runs past with a wooden doll trailing behind her on a string. She's laughing, a sound that skips along the flagstones like tossed coins. Rome is fully awake now, but you're moving slower than the crowd, protected in your little cocoon of freshly shaved serenity. You think back to the tavern, the bathhouse, the lemon-scented oil, and the night filled with stories and shared olives. You think about the whispered gossip, the ancient haircut rituals, and how deeply satisfying it is to sit still while someone gently scrapes your face with a blade. Here, you realize even the smallest acts, sleeping on a bench, sipping spiced wine, getting a haircut, are steeped in ritual. They're more than chores. They're acts of identity, of citizenship, of living fully in the moment. And now, with your cheeks shining and your sandals properly tied, you're ready to see where the rest of this day in ancient Rome takes you.
You drift now toward one of Rome's more peculiar marketplaces, the Vicus Tuscus, a stretch of cobbled road nestled between the Roman Forum and the Theater of Pompeii. It's early enough that the usual crowds haven't quite clogged the arteries of the city, so you take your time, ambling past the stalls as merchants begin their melodic chants. Oysters fresh as Neptune's bath, and sandals for souls blessed by Mercury. You're here for something stranger than seafood or footwear today. You're following the faint scent of, goose fat and charcoal? Because today, dear wanderer, you're exploring the bustling and bizarre world of ancient Roman cosmetics. You come upon a woman seated on a low stool, mixing crushed rose petals with chalky white lead, stirring it into a tiny jar with something that resembles a honey dipper. Her stall is modest, but clearly popular. A few matrons hover nearby, discussing whether Egyptian coal or Roman soot makes for better eyeliner. You lean closer, careful not to knock over the amphora of rouge sitting at your feet. The vendor greets you without looking up. "You're not here for lip stain," she says. "You've got that 'I'm about to ask 100 questions' look. Guilty as charged?" She begins to explain. Roman cosmetics were a patchwork of imported trends and native experimentation. From Spain came brilliant red cinnabar. From Gaul, powdered chalk. And from Alexandria, the perfumes, myrrh, cinnamon, and a scent made from crushed civet glands that you're pretty sure you can smell now. You try not to gag.
Despite the empire's fondness for natural beauty, or at least its poets' obsession with it, women, and a fair number of men, went to extraordinary lengths to craft their perfect face. Foundations made with white lead were applied in layers so thick the wearers sometimes resembled marble statues on a warm day. Historians still argue, your vendor friend mutters, whether that pallor was for fashion or because they were actually faint from the fumes. She lets you dab some balm on your wrist. It's beeswax mixed with olive oil and rose essence, meant to be a kind of primitive moisturizer. It's soothing, though she warns not to use it near open flames. Goose fat, it turns out, is quite flammable. As you watch another woman buy a small jar of antimony eyeliner, the vendor leans in. Want to know the weirdest one? You raise an eyebrow. Mouse ashes. You blink. For removing facial hair, burn a mouse, mix the ashes with vinegar, apply gently. You step back, just slightly. She laughs. Oh, don't be dramatic. It's not the strangest thing sold here. Some women swear by crocodile dung facials, imported from Egypt. Exotic. Smells like death, but makes your skin glow. You nod slowly. This explains so much about why Roman beauty standards were both so strict and so fragrant. Another stall nearby is offering teeth whitening paste made from crushed pumice and, of course, urine. You're told it's particularly effective when using Portuguese urine. Has more bite, says the vendor with a wink.
You're not sure if that's a joke or a marketing line. Men aren't left out of this powdery parade either. You overhear a conversation between two young aristocrats debating whether beard balm from Germania is better than the new Syrian blend. They tug at their well-oiled facial hair, nodding gravely. One of them smells strongly of cinnamon and smugness. You pause at a stall with a full display of wigs. They're mostly for women, but a few toupees sit on the side. Romans loved their hairpieces, especially blonde wigs made from the hair of enslaved Germanic women. Wearing one, they believed, captured a little bit of barbarian vitality. Also, they just liked the novelty. You try one on. It's itchy. Wear it long enough, the wig seller says, and you'll forget your real hair ever existed. The cosmetic world of ancient Rome was vast and layered, built not just on vanity, but identity. Rich women hired personal cosmetae, slaves trained in makeup and hairstyling. Morning beauty routines could take hours, and the results were as much for public admiration as for private confidence. Still, as you wander through jars of lead paste and eyeshadow made from powdered beetles, you can't help but marvel. In a city of marble temples, towering aqueducts, and chariot races, one of the most competitive arenas was simply the human face. You watch a final customer pick up a perfume vial etched with dolphins. She spritzes it lightly into her hair. The scent wafts toward you, jasmine and something smoky. And for a second, you understand the appeal. In a city as chaotic as Rome, sometimes it feels good to have even a single lovely thing under your control. You thank the vendor and move along, leaving behind the clinking of glass jars and the murmur of cosmetic conspiracies. As the crowd thickens, you reflect on what you've learned, that beauty, like empire, is built on layers, some noble, some murky, and some, quite literally, made of mice.
The sun is beginning its slow slide down the Tiber, casting long shadows over the red-tiled roofs of the city. You find yourself meandering once more through the quieter parts of Rome, the streets where perfume no longer clings to the air, where the shopkeepers are shuttering their stalls and the stray dogs are stretching out under marble fountains. It's the perfect time to pay one last visit, not to a temple or a bathhouse or even a latrine, though you've certainly seen your fair share. No, this final stop is something a little softer, something more personal. Tonight, you step gently into the intimate rituals of Roman nighttime hygiene. The domus you enter is modest but well kept. You're guided through the peristyle courtyard by the gentle glow of oil lamps, their flames flickering like sleepy fireflies. A servant nods politely as you pass. Your feet echo on the tiled mosaic floors, the cool surface a welcome relief from the heat that still radiates off the brick walls. You're ushered into a small, surprisingly cozy room,
what we might call a bedroom, though Romans wouldn't have used the space exactly like that. On one side lies a simple wooden bed, with a straw-stuffed mattress draped in a linen sheet. On the other, a tiny washing basin rests beside a bronze mirror, slightly dented but polished to a gentle gleam. This is where the real evening routine begins. You watch as a woman, perhaps the lady of the house, sits before the mirror, slowly removing her earrings. She dabs her face with a damp cloth soaked in rose water, astringent and slightly sour-smelling. Nearby, a servant carefully combs out her hair using a bone-handled comb, starting from the ends and working upward, with the patience of someone trained in the art of untangling both knots and tempers. A jar of barley flour paste is opened, used to cleanse the skin. It's rubbed in tiny circles across her cheeks and forehead, then gently wiped away with another cloth. There's something strangely modern about this motion. You find yourself relaxing just watching her, soothed by the repetitive grace of self-care passed down through centuries. You're handed a thin cup of warm wine spiced with myrrh and honey. Not too strong, just enough to ease the nerves. The kind of drink Romans believed could soothe you into dreams. You sip slowly, letting the warmth settle into your limbs. On the table, you notice a small pouch of herbs, lavender, rue, chamomile. It's part of a traditional Roman sleep aid, tucked under the pillow to calm dreams and ward off nightmares. Superstition, sure, but you're not above accepting help from any direction tonight. The woman, let's call her Julia, sits on her bed now, rubbing a salve onto her hands. Made from beeswax, olive oil, and a pinch of crushed mint, leaves behind a light sheen and a faint tingling coolness. As her servant dims the lamp, you can almost hear the winding down of the city itself, voices drifting from balconies, the occasional call of a vendor making one last pitch, and far off, the lonely bark of a guard dog. You think to yourself, with a small smile, historians still argue whether Roman evenings were this peaceful, or if we just prefer to imagine them that way.
It's an amusing thought. You glance down at the basin where the rose water has turned cloudy, and at the worn bristles of the toothbrush, a frayed stick of mastic wood. Someone will rinse it in the morning, ready for another day of polite smiles and hidden dental decay. A breeze moves through the open window, carrying with it the scent of fig leaves and distant cooking fires. The bed creaks as Julia lies back, pulling the sheet over her. Her eyes close slowly, peacefully. And for a brief moment, standing in this quiet Roman bedroom, you forget that thousands of years separate you from this woman. In the end, the rituals are so familiar. We cleanse, we comfort, we prepare for sleep. You turn to leave, passing once again through the dim halls and out into the starlit street. The city is quieter now, hushed beneath the velvet cloak of night. A few lanterns sway gently in the breeze, casting dancing shadows onto the walls. You take one last look behind you, at the house, the basin, the bed, and then you breathe in deeply. It's been a long, strange journey, across the lavatories of bathhouses and the perfume counters of the Subura, past vinegar-soaked toothbrushes and terrifying barbers with dull razors, through alleys of chamber pots and temples of scented oils. You've learned that Romans were far more obsessed with cleanliness than they're often given credit for. You've learned that hygiene and beauty and even bad breath were never just personal. They were political, spiritual, and deeply woven into the Roman way of life. And now you've reached the end. The city settles into its own sleep, and so perhaps should you.
Now that the streets of Rome have finally stilled, now that the chatter has faded to whispers, and the oil lamps have burned down to a gentle flicker, you find yourself returning to that quiet place in your mind. The footsteps you took today, the ones through perfumed markets, echoing bathhouses, and crowded streets, begin to soften behind you, like ripples smoothing over the surface of a calm fountain. Your limbs grow heavier, slower, as if the stone floors of a Roman villa have turned to silk beneath your feet. The sounds of laughter, of sellers hawking mouse ash remedies and goose fat creams melt into the background. The smells, rosewater, mint, olive oil, perhaps even a whiff of old vinegar, drift lazily through your thoughts before fading completely. Even the absurd moments, the urine mouthwash, the cosmetic mouse ash, the ancient arguments about Germanic wig hair, now seem oddly gentle, like the distant echo of a dream half remembered. Whatever noise the world holds outside your window, here, in this moment, in this warm corner of ancient Rome, you're safe, you're still, you're at peace. The marble fades to mist, the cobblestones to cotton. Even your breath begins to slow, sinking with the quiet rhythm of the sleeping city.
Sleep now, traveler. Let the layers of history fold around you like a soft linen sheet. And if you wake in the middle of the night, wondering whether the Romans truly believed mouse ash would make your skin glow, just smile, because somewhere, deep in time, someone did.